Hello, this is Jim McKeeth, and welcome to Day 3 of the Delphi Bootcamp on building effective user interfaces with FireMonkey. We're going to cover a lot of different topics today, all related to the FireMonkey framework and how you use it to build effective user interfaces. We're going to cover topics like animations and transitions, as well as things like layouts, user interface paradigms, etc. Real quick about me, I'm the lead worldwide developer, evangelist, and engineer for Embarcadero Technologies, longtime software developer. My claim to fame is back in 2000, I invented and patented the pattern in swipe to unlock. The company I was working for at the time filed the patents, and they own the patents for that, so I don't get money. But one day a headline popped up in my newsfeed saying Apple didn't invent swipe to unlock, Jim McKeeth did. And I was like, oh my goodness, that's my name. Went and looked, and sure enough, I did in fact have a patent on drawing geometric shapes to authenticate yourself to a computer system. So that's pretty cool. Joining me is Daniele Teti.
I am Daniele Teti, CIO of Bittime Professionals, the Italian company which provides high-level consulting, trainings, and development. Bittime Professional is based in Italy but offers its service all over the world. I'm also a book author. In this speech we will talk about my last Delphi book. I'm a quite prolific open source developer, especially in the Delphi area. I'm the lead developer of Delphi MVC framework, which is one of the most used open source RESTful framework, and some other well-known projects.
You'll definitely want to check out Daniele's book, which is the Delphi Cookbook, which he'll talk about some later. And also his open source projects are fantastic, and I know a lot of people really love those and get a lot out of them. So real quick, let's talk about some user interface considerations. The basics of FireMonkey. FireMonkey, anything can be nested. And so what this means is really flexible. For example, in VCL, there is a button and an image button or a bitmap button. In the image button, you can put a picture in it, or it has that built in. On FireMonkey, there's just one button, and then that one button, you can add an image to it. So you just put an image on the button, and all of a sudden the button has an image embedded in it. Anything can be nested in anything on FireMonkey. Very, very flexible. There's a property called clip children. So let's say, for example, if you put an edit box down and you put a label in the edit box, if you move the label outside the area of the edit box and clip children's set to false, then you can still see the label. But if you turn clip children on to true, then that label will disappear if it's outside the client area of the edit box. And so what that allows you to do, if you have clip children off, then you can put a label on an edit box and move it to the left. And then anytime you move the edit box, that label stays relative to it. So that's really useful. But if you turn clip children off, then you can put something inside of it that's larger than in a client area, and it just clips the edges off so it doesn't actually go outside of it. So very, very flexible in the way you do that. Other thing that's different about FireMonkey compared to VCL is most numeric properties, for example, like position and size, are singles. They're floating point numbers. And you can also attach animations to them, which we'll talk more about later. So it's a little different in that you may be expecting them to be an integer. You may even use them like an integer, but you can set them to floating point values. And so you can get really minute movements around, make it very accurate. Also, if you ever need to get a screenshot or a bitmap representation of what you see on the screen, then you can use make screenshot. And now make screenshot, because controls can be nested, gets a screenshot, a bitmap representation of that control and all its children. So that's a very, very effective way to grab a representation of the screen. So let's talk about anchors. Anchors allow you to position a control relative to one or more edges of the parent. Okay, the default is top left. And so what that means is as the parent moves around, the control's position relative to the top left stays the same. So if you put a button down on a form and you resize the form, the button stays relative to the top left. Now you can change that to be bottom right. And then when you expand the form, the button moves and stays with the bottom right corner of the form. If you pin it to two opposite sides, so let's say, for example, left and right. So you say top, left, and right. Then as you expand the form horizontally, the button would expand. But if you expand the form vertically, it would just stay relative to the top. You can pin it to all four and it will grow and shrink with the form, or you can pin it to none and it will just kind of float in the middle and stay roughly centered. It's kind of weird behavior. Very rarely I use that layout, but it is available to you, and there may be times that you want to use it. So each control can have 0 to 4 anchors. Alignment aligns control with its parents, setting its anchor's size and position. Okay, so the default is none. But let's say you want to have a control, like for example, a layout, fill the client area of the form. So you can set it to client, and that means that control would fill out all the space available to it. So frequently what I'll do is put down a layout. Now a layout's just a container similar to a panel in VCL that you can put other controls in. Now you can put anything in anything really, but a layout's just the simplest one. So if you just want something simple to hold other things, you use a layout. And so I'll put a layout on the top and I'll align it to top, and then I'll put another layout in the main area and I'll align it to client, and then I'll put stuff in the client area and put stuff on the top, and this kind of gives me a flexible layout that I'm able to work with. But you can do all sorts of different alignments. You can align things to the left, you can align things to most left, which is kind of interesting. So if you align it to the left and you put something else that's aligned to most left, it will go further left than what's on left, and so that way it allows you to prioritize what goes to the left or top, right, etc. You can fill preserving aspect ratio with fit left, and fit right. Those are new. The most and the fits are new compared to VCL, along with the resizing only one axis with vertical center, horizontal, and horizontal center. Also as new is the center, contents, and scale. So client fills all the space available to it. Center centers inside that space. So it doesn't resize, it just centers in the space. Contents is interesting in that contents fills all the space of the parent, irregardless of other things that are aligned in the parent's client area. And then scale affects the things that are on it. So if you put something down and say it's scale, then as it grows, the things that are on it also grow. Something else that's new in FireMonkey is controls have spacing via margins and padding. So there's you use margins to set the spacing for siblings and padding to set the spacing for children. So with padding, then when you put a control down and set the control on it, and you set that control to, for example, client alignment, it will align all but for the padding. Okay, so if you have a padding of 10, it will leave a border of 10 on whichever size you line that for. Margins, on the other hand, if you put something down and give it a margin and then tell it to expand, then that's how much space it leaves between itself and its parent, or itself and any siblings. So it causes it to contract in. So padding pushes things away, margins cause a control to contract in. What this is really good for is if you want to maybe put a button in the top left corner, but you don't want it all the way in the corner. So used to be in VCL, you'd put down a panel, which would be like a layout, and then put a button on it, and then try and set the button so that it was, 10 from the top and 10 from the left, and then you would align the panel to the left, but then not the button. And it was a lot of, spin, parry, thrust, maneuvering, trying to get that to work. But now you can just take that button and say, hey, button, you have margins of 10 on top, left, and bottom, and align you to the left. And the button will go over there, and it will just leave a nice little margin around there, which gives it a really nice layout, really makes it look really nice. So let's just look at some simple stuff here with FireMonkey. I'm going to take a button and put it down here. I'm going to make it into an image button that has an image on it. So first thing I'm going to do is take the text that's on here, and let's just clear it out. So there's text, get rid of that. And we're going to put a bitmap on it, or an image on it. So I'm just going to go here and find an image, and drag and drop an image onto the button. Now you're going to look over here in your structure panel. By default, it assumes you're going to put it into a container control, which in this case is a form or a layout. If I had a layout, it would put it in the layout. So it didn't put it on the button by default, but I can just take that image and drag it onto the button, and now it's on the button. Okay, so I want this to, next thing I want to do is actually put a label on here so I can put text in it. And I'm going to use the IDE Insight, just go label, and there's my label. And again, it's on the form, so then I got to put from the form onto the button. There we go. And there's my label. Now, let's see. I want to take this guy and I want to say fit. And the label, I'm going to say client. Let's put this, actually, let's go none. Let's take the image and go left. That's what I'm going to do. And now the label, client. And now let's put this to fit. Fit left. That's what I need to do. Fit left. Okay, so what that does is now when I resize the label, you'll notice that the image stays proportional. Okay? Or I might say it's the button, the image stays proportional. But you'll notice it runs all the way up to the edge. That's kind of tacky. So let's take this and we're going down here to margins, and I'm going to put a margin all the way around the label or the image. And then let's do the same thing on the label. Let's set the bottom and then not the left. Okay. So, and then we want to take the label and set the text settings on it. Text settings from leading to center. Okay. And we have a button. Now, one thing I want to run this here so you can see this. So if I click here on the button, you notice the button clicks. But then if I move my mouse over here, the button's not clicking. It clicks here, but not here. And the reason is the image has a property here called hit test. If you look at the label's hit test is set to false, but the image's hit test is set to true. So what that means is the image is capturing that click. So we just take the image and set hit test to false, and now I run it. And now you see the whole thing is a button. And we can put an image on here now since we have that. And so the property here is the multi-resolution bitmap, which we'll talk a little more about why that is so cool on Friday. But let's go. There we go. Crazy looking lady picture. And there we go. There's our image button. Make it even bigger here so we can see that. So there we go. We've made a nice compound image, or a compound component, we'll call it that, which is a label with other controls on it to get some different behavior. Let's see. Oh, I was also going to show you with the edit box. Let's do that. Edit box. Edit box. And again, see, it's on top of my button, but it's not in the button. See? So I can put it over here. And we can tell, because if I drag the button, see, it's not attached to that. So we're going to take this guy and we're going to put a label on the edit box. And we're going to put the label above it like this. And we're going to put a button on the edit box. Oh, it's like way off the side. Where's the position? Position. Yeah, so set that to 0. There we go, there's the button. So we're going to put the button right here. All right, so now if I take this edit box and drag it, see, those are attached to it. And that's because they're on the edit box. Now, if I go to the edit box, there's a property here of clip child, clip children, and I just click that, and see, now they've disappeared. Now, if I move the button so that it's overlapping the edit box and then say clip children, oops, that's on the button. On there, clip children. You see, it clips the children so that they're only visible within over the edit itself. So that's a way you can create a button that has other, or create any kind of control that has other controls that are adjacent to it and that move around with it. Oops. Clicked on something else. So there you go. It's a couple of cool things you can do with FireMonkey. Now let's talk about some of the layout options. I mentioned the T layout, which is the simplest layout, but there are some other layouts that are much more flexible and have a lot more options available to them. The T flowout arranges the child controls like words in a paragraph. That's the best way I've found to explain it. So you put all the controls down, and they automatically just flow like they're words in a paragraph. And so as you resize the flow layout, they'll move around and they'll just fill that space up. You can use the T flow layout break in there in order to force a break. So if you look there at the image on the left, you see after button 5, there's an empty space where another button could be. There's a T-flow layout break there, which causes it to force to go on the next line. So it's like a forced carriage return in a paragraph, if you will. And then you can also change the way it lays out, the alignment of those. So you see on the left and the right, those are the same controls, but one is left justified, the other one's right justified. And there's actually a justification that's it's like paragraphs. When you lay out your paragraph in your word processor, you can say I want it left justified, right justified, centered. So let's look at the flow layout. Flow layout. So here we go. Layouts just look like these little boxes here. When you run them, when you run the application, the layout's invisible. It doesn't have any visual representation of it. But if I take this flow layout and I'm add a button to it, so let's go here, button. You notice it actually put the button on the layout because it recognizes the layout is a container control, and it's going to most likely be getting other controls on it. So see that? We just put all those buttons on there. Let's go ahead and align this to client. So it's going to fill the form. And we see as I resize the form, the buttons flow like a paragraph of text. And I can resize one of these guys here. I can make it bigger. And everything still flows the same. Now I can do a flow break in here. Flow break, which is right there. And then I'll add some more buttons down. And interestingly, because the flow break is a layout, it thinks it's a container. So let's put this on there. There we go. And let's put some more buttons down. Because I had the flow break selected is why it did that. Flow button, 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 button. Okay. And now, when I run this, see there's always, after 11, there's always a break. It's never going to put another button on 11 after 11. See that? Because there's a flow break there. And then I can also go here. Oops, let's see. I put the button down. And I want to say flow direction, left to right, right to left. Oh, just change the direction of the flow. And justify. There we go. So justify, we're going to change that to right. So now it's right justified or center. And you can also justify the last line individually as well. See, there you go. You can do that. It's like full justification on characters. So anyway, that's really cool. Very powerful thing you can use in your layouts by using the flow layout. Great thing about this is it'll put all your controls down there and it just flows however your form fits. So the users can resize their forms as much as they want to, and all these things will just relay out as they need to fit the space that's provided for them. Grid layout. This one's really useful. I find myself using this one quite a bit. It arranges the child controls in a grid of equal size. So let's say you wanted to make a calculator and you wanted to have some buttons down there. You could just throw them all in there in the grid layout, and you'd specify on the grid layout item width and item height, and then that would automatically set all the children to that size. You can set the margins. Now remember, margins cause a control to contract in. So you can set the margins of some of those controls in order to have them make a little bit smaller. So you see in the second image there, what is it? Button 5 is got some margins all the way around it, and etc. So the ones in the middle there are contracted a little bit because they have margins on them. We'll do a grid layout. Right here, grid layout. And we're going to put some buttons on here. But it could be anything. Button. Okay, so you notice you put all the buttons down. All the buttons are exactly the same size. And just keep putting them down next to each other. So if we come here on the layout itself, there's a property of item width and item height. So here I can change this. So let's make the item height 32, and it resizes all those buttons there. And so it just puts them in a grid. So this is, like I said, could be useful like at a calculator. All right, so we can put some more buttons down there. And you have like a keypad, for example, or we can take these buttons and select them and add some margins on them. They're gonna got a little space between them. Grid layout. Now the grid panel layout is similar, but not exactly the same. The grid panel creates a grid of the specified numbers of rows and columns. So in the grid layout, you say what size the items are, and you just throw them in there, and they'll fill it up. In the grid panel, you say, I want this many columns and this many rows, and you could put controls down, and those controls can be in one cell. Each cell can contain one control, or the control can span multiple cells. So this reminds me kind of the HTML, or not HTML, the HTML tables that you would make, where you would specify the table, and you'd say this is how big the table is, and you'd make a cell, and you can make a cell align multiple columns or align multiple rows. So that's the same sort of thing you see here. So you still set the height and width and alignment and anchors of each of the children, and then that's the grid panel just controls how they're laid out within the cells that you put them in. This is something that long ago in VCL, I saw a lot of people loved a third-party component that did something similar to this. And what it does is you put down a scaled layout, and it stretches the children controls as it is resized at runtime. Okay, so this means if you put a form down and filled it full of a T-scaled layout, and then put all your buttons and controls down, and then at runtime, that form gets stretched and expanded, then it will expand so that it's always filling the entire form. All right. So this way you don't ever have empty space in your form. It just fills everything on your form. So your buttons get bigger, everything gets bigger, and it just scales up to fill that form. Now, if you set the alignment of the T-scaled layout to fit, then the scaled layout will maintain its aspect ratio, so it won't ever distort it, right? So if you only stretch it up and down, then you'll have some space at the top and bottoms. But as soon as you start stretching right and left as well, then it will expand to fill that out. So you can either have it stretched like you see there, that text is really stretched horizontally. That's without setting it to fit, or you can set it to fit, and it'll always maintain the aspect ratio as it stretches. Scrollables includes T-scrollbox, T-vertical scrollbox, etc. And what these are container controls that allow the children to take up more space than the parent. Okay, so what that means is if you're going to have more controls than are visible on the parent, or maybe you have an image that is larger that can be viewed in the parent's client area, you would use a T-scrollbox or one of the variations of it. And so what you would typically do, the typical scenario, is you're going to put the scroll box down, and you're going to align it to client. So it's going to be as big as it can, filling out the parent. And you're going to put other controls in it. Now, it's important that you don't align it to client, the controls that are inside the scroll box, because the client area of the scroll box is the size of the scroll box. So if you do that, then it will contract it down, and it won't be bigger than the scroll box anymore. And it'll be like, why isn't this working? Well, you told it to only be that big. There is no maximum client area. So you can have things bigger than it, but if you soon as you set to client or try and anchor it to the right or anchor it to the bottom, it's not going to work, because the right and bottom don't exist, but they have to exist. And so if you try and anchor it to the right and or bottom, then it will assume it's the right and bottom of the parent area. So I'll show you an example of what I'm talking about there. So don't align the children to client or to the right or to the bottom. Always align them to top left. And then at runtime, the user can scroll to see more contents. So let's look at the scroll box. This is really useful, but not always necessarily obvious how you want to use it. So we're just using a regular scroll box. There's a vertical scroll box, horizontal scroll box, frame scroll boxes, etc. So there we go, scroll box. And put it down here. And again, it's empty like a layout. And this time we're going to put an image inside of it here. Image. And in this image, I want to load a picture here I have. Well, let's just do, there we go, let's picture this guy. And we're going to make this image really big here so that it's actually the full size of this image. So I'm going to come in here and well, let's make it bigger than that. Width 500, height. Oops, 500, not 5,000. Okay, so now when I run this, we can scroll and see this image. So if this very large image here is visible, so now if we take this scroll box and we align this to client, right? And we'll run it. And so we'll make the form smaller, but we can still scroll to see the image. Okay, so you could do this if, for example, you had a bunch of controls. You could scroll those controls within there as well to make them visible. Now, as I commented before, you don't want to align this to client because now it takes up the space and the scroll box does no good because it's always going to fit inside that scroll box. Okay? And likewise, if you set the alignment to done, and if I anchor this, instead of top left, if I anchor it to bottom right, then it's like, where did it go? It's because the bottom right is virtual. It's just like, it just disappeared off the bottom right because it just can be out anywhere. So don't do that. You always want to have anchored, at least for a regular scroll box, to top left. Now, vertical scroll box or horizontal scroll box, it's either top or vertical, or top or left, depending on which one you're doing. But there you go. That's the functionality of the scroll box. The tab control is a really, really useful control for laying out your form. What it does is it allows you to have a stack of visible tabs. And you can either have tabs that are at the top, like you see here, that are visible that the user can click on, which used to be a really popular user interface paradigm in Windows. It's kind of gone away just stylistically. I still like them. I still think they're very useful. You can set the tab position, though, to the default's platform default, which in Starter Edition, since Starter Edition only does Windows, isn't a big deal. But if you later upgrade to Pro and you deploy it on iOS, for example, iOS says that your tab should be at the bottom. And so what it'll do is automatically move those tabs to the bottom. So if it's platform default, it'll be on the top on Windows, bottom on iOS. But you can change the tab position to none, and it will hide the tabs. And then what you can do then is you can have, as the user interacting with your user interface, change the screen, just switch to different tabs based on different things the user does. And so this could just be a way that you could flexibly move them through different screens without having to open and close different forms. You can use the T-tab change action to animate transitions, and there's some transition animation options, which I'll show you an example of later. This is one of the favorites of mine, just the tab control. So put this down here, and I can right click and say add tab item, add tab item, add tab item. And now we have a tab control with 3 tab items on it. Now, that's not very interesting until we actually put something on here. So let's put down a button on here. And then we'll go to tab item 2, and we'll put down an edit. Oh, I have to actually select T-edit. I typed the wrong thing. T-edit. There's our edit. And over here, we'll put down a label. And now I'll run this. Not very interesting, but at least you can see the behavior as we switch to the tabs. Now, right now, the tab position on the tab control. Now, it's important to notice that this is the tab control right now is selected, but then this, now I've selected an individual tab item. Okay, now I'm on the tab control, now I'm on the tab item. So it's important to know where you're at, what you have selected. So it's interesting because you've selected this, but yet this label is on the tab item, which you get to by selecting the tab itself. So I can go to the tab control and find the property here of tab position, which right now is set to platform default. You can set it to dots, which is these little dots here. And so then at runtime, you can actually see the dots and the user can click on it to navigate through. Or you can set it to none or explicitly top or bottom. Now at none, again, we have the dots, but they're circles this time. But at runtime, the dots are gone. What we can do is on the button click event here, we'll say tab control dot active tab equals tab item 2. So now I click the button and I've changed the tab item. So what we've done now is it's like, you can have something where you're changing the layout of your form based on user interaction with it. So the user doesn't have to know they're dealing with a tab control, right? So they don't see the tabs, but yet you're able to switch between two different screens or change the layout of things or move things around based on user action just by simply flipping tabs. We'll talk about frames later. You can actually take frames and put them on tabs. This is a great way to lay things out differently as well. Recommend that as well. So that's tab control. The multi-view is a new control that we have for laying out your user interface, and it is really, really cool. They originally talked about calling it super panel because it's so super. Basically, the multi-view, it really comes into really very powerful in multi-device development because it understands the different UI paradigms of different devices. But even just on one single platform, it's very, very cool because what you can do is you put down the multi-view and it has a client area and a menu area and a master panel, a detail panel. And what it does is you can define how the master panel comes out over it. And so you can have it come out like a drawer, which is my favorite. So it just comes from the left like a drawer, or you can have it come from the right like a drawer. You can have it push, where it pushes it over. You can have it pop over. You can have the navigator panel, which is something that's new, kind of new in Windows 10, where it's always kind of there as a little toolbar-like thing on the left, but then it can expand out to be bigger and show more details in it. It's very, very flexible control, very great way to lay out user interface. And the cool thing about it, like I said, is that when you go to multi-device in the future, it can automatically adapt itself to different devices and different UI paradigms. This is the multi-views demo that we ship with Delphi Starter Edition. Go ahead and run it here so you can see how this works. So by default, the multi-view is set to platform default behavior, which in this case on Windows is the navigator pane. So the navigator pane means we have this little toolbar type thing over here on the left that I can click and interact with. See, we have able to click on this and interact with it. But this guy up here, this button is the master button, and the 3 lines is called a sandwich icon because it looks kind of like a sandwich or hamburger. Sorry, hamburger is a type of sandwich. But anyway, you have the 2 buns and the patty in the middle here. So when you click the hamburger icon, it expands out. So that's what the navigator pane does, is it expands out like this. Now, this is customizable. I can change the width of the collapsed width. So see how it's a little wider, or I can make it a lot narrower, right? So this is all customizable. Or we can change it. So the cool thing right now, if it's on platform behavior, is when this runs on a different device, whether it be like an iPad or an iPhone or an Android tablet or Android phone or whatever, is it will change the layout between some of these different behaviors. So for example, here's the docked panel. which is what you'll get on a iPad in landscape mode, is the dock panel view, which is it out like this on the side. Now, if you go switch that iPad into portrait mode, you're going to get popover, which popover means it's going to pop down like this. My favorite mode is drawer mode. So drawer mode, it's hidden until you tap the hamburger button, or if you drag from the left, look at that. It comes out. I love that. That's so cool. There's a custom view, which in this case is going to just appear in the middle, and the navigator pane, which we already saw, is that one there. So let's look at some of the customizations you can do in the drawer. You can have the sliding mode overlap, which is what it is right now, which means it comes over the top, or you can have it push. Oops, I grabbed the wrong spot. So with push, see this? It pushes the detail view out of the way. You can have it on the left or the right. So see on the right, I'll just click the button this time. Boop, push it out. Touch sliding area. So since I'm able to do this sliding thing, it gives 15 pixels for that. If I want to make it really big, I can do it really big. Boom, like that. And now it's really easy to get a hold of, or make it really small. And now you can't touch it all. You have to use the button. And we can then also change the duration. How fast do you want it to come out? So here it's 0. So boom, it just appears. Or I can make it really slow. Look at that. See, that comes out nice and slow animation. Okay. So there's the multi-view. I'm going to make a new multi-device application here. Saved multi-view demo. Nope. And I'm going to show you how to use the multi-view from scratch. Spell it correctly, MULTI-view, multi-view. Okay, so this is the navigation pane. And we're going to put a layout here. Layout. A regular layout. You could use any layout or anything you wanted to be the detail area. Okay? And we're going to put a button on it here. So let's take this and align this to client. And the multi-view, we're going to, so, okay. Now we take the navigation, the multi-view, and we're going to bring it front. Control, bring to front. So it's on top. And we're going to come here and we're going to say master button is button 1. And someplace else. Target control is our layout. Okay. And so now what it's done is right now it's pushing over because the mode, right there, mode. I knew it's called mode. So right now the mode is showing up as a panel. It's panel mode right now. So I'm going to put drawer mode with my favorite mode and we'll run this. And I tap the button and there we go. It slides out over the top. Now there's nothing in it right now, but we could easily put whatever we want to in here. It's easiest to have it in panel mode at design time because then it's visible. And let's put down another button in here. Inside there. And let's switch this back to drawer mode because it's cool. DRA drawer mode, and we'll run it. And there we go, it pops out. You can, there's methods on, you can call procedures on the multi-view you can call to collapse it and expand it, and then you saw all the customizations you can do. But there you go, that's how you can use the multi-view. It's a great way to add some interactivity, some creative layouts to your application to control the way you're laying out your forms. So there are two different list controls available for you in FireMonkey. There's the ListView and the ListBox, TListView and TListBox. TListBox is similar to the VCL ListBox. It's a nice flexible control, very easy to use. It has a items property that is a list of strings, is T-strings, and you can just say items add and put strings in there. And I frequently use a TListBox as like a logging box to when I'm debugging, for example. Instead of doing something else, I just say, hey, I'll throw on a list box and just throw items in there, and I can go and look and say, oh, I see what's going on. This happened and I didn't expect that. And then it's really nice for that. You can just throw items in there. So it makes a nice log box. But a list box also is flexible in that you can add lists of controls. So you can put controls in there and customize those controls, and the user can then scroll through these lists of controls. So very, very flexible. Pretty much you can put anything you want to into a T-list box. All right. And then in FireMonkey, they said, you know what, the list box doesn't scroll very fast because of the fact it's so flexible. You can put anything you want to into it. So they came up with the ListView. Now there is a ListView in VCL that's completely different. They just happen to have the same name. But the ListView, this new to FireMonkey, is specifically designed to be very, very fast to scroll. But it's also got some great design time customization you can do with it in order to customize its look and feel. It's actually really, really powerful in what you can do with it, but it's very much optimized around scrolling quickly. So if you have a lot of data, especially when you're moved to mobile devices that you want usually be able to scroll through quickly, you might consider using a list view. Although some of the customization of the way the items appear with a list view is really, really cool. So you might want to use a list view for it in that regard. A little bit different behavior, which I'll show you here in an example. So let's take a look at the list box. If you use list box in VCL, the base functionality, this is going to be really familiar. It has an items property. These are the items in the list box. And there we go. But it does also have the ability to add special items to it, like, for example, a search box. So now if I run this, I can filter this, which is kind of cool. See there? That's pretty slick. There we go. Nothing. Clears it out. That's functionality built into it. If you want to add stuff here at runtime, let's put down a button. And on the button, and let's put down an edit box too. Edit. Oh, it's a date edit? That's not a date edit. T edit. Regular edit. Okay. Oh, these are both parented by the list box. So the list box can parent controls too. The search box. I want the search box on the list box. All right. The edit box, though, should be on the form. I must have put it. So you got to come here and change the position when you do that. There we go. All right. This always happens when I'm doing off the cuff examples here. So list box 1.items.add edit 1.text. All right. So I'll type my name. Boom. Added to the list box. And I can filter for my name. All right. There you go. There's a simple examples with the list box. You can actually do a lot more with it. It has item editor. You can come in here where you can add additional types of items to it. Although you can't mix strings with regular items. If you want to add different types of items, then you would have to remove the strings from it. But that is the list box. It's great for small lists or things you're not going to need to scroll a lot, especially on mobile devices, which Starter doesn't do mobile devices. But the list view was designed specifically around being able to be great scrolling functionality on mobile devices. So let's take a look at the list view. Okay, so list view. Here's my list view. Now, first of all, I come in here and notice there's no add items. If I come here to the list view and look for items property, there's no items property. List view is not based around a string, T-strings collection, but you can still add items to it. So let's go ahead and do that. Put down my button and my edit. Okay. And what I want to do is go list view 1.items. So it does have an items. Add text. All right. So what's happening here is when I call add, it's actually creating a new list view item and adding it to the list view, the collection. And I'm going to modify the text property of this and say equals edit1.text. Okay. So now I'll type my name here and we've added, hello, world. So first of all, notice it's got this, this is the detail object on here. So these objects, this is designed to be a little bit more of a robust system for displaying text. But anyway, that's if you want to just display text, you can do that. If I want to take off those items on it there, the details on it, I can come here and say item appearance. Oh no, item object appearance. And the item object, the accessory, that's what it is, and visible false. And so let's run this now. Hello. Okay, so now we have no more accessory on it. Okay, not very interesting at this point, right? But let me show you how cool this is. So now we're going to come in here and I actually have a project I made earlier. Reopen ListView sample 1. Save change to that. No. Okay, so what this one has is I've got a list, an image list here that has some images in it. And I have some code here that's going to populate this list view. So let's go ahead and run this. And I can't remember what state I put this demo in. All right. So I forgot. So first thing I want to do is I'm going to actually just delete this and put down new list view because I was playing with it earlier and messed it up, but that's okay. So new list view, and I'll show you everything I went through to do this. So let's go ahead and run this new list view, and I'll populate it with some data. And there we go. It says text 0, text 1, text 2, text 3. Now, this button is actually putting in text and images, both, but we're not seeing the images. I'll show you the code here, what I'm doing for this. And ignore this code down here for now. But it's what we're doing is we're creating an item here, list view items add. We're going to, in reference to the item, it's a list view item. And then we're setting the image index, the text, the detail, and the button text on it. So now if I come here to list view, and it has an item appearance property that's embedded in it. And I'm going to say, I want the item to appear, item appearance. We're going to say list item, which is just plain text. We're going to say, instead we want to have a list item with an image list item with bottom detail and right button. All right, now we're going to run this. And I populate it. And look at that. We've got buttons over here, and the images aren't there because I didn't set the image index. Let's do that. Images right here. So I set that to the image list. So the image list has some images in it. We see here a bunch of people's faces. And now when I run this and populate it, we see we have all those images here on here. Now, images are kind of small. Can't really see them. So let's make those images bigger. So what we do here is I come over and right click on this and I say toggle edit or toggle design mode. And so what this does, this brings up a design mode that lets me move these things around in here. This is really kind of cool. So first of all, I'm going to come here to item appearance and I can change this, right? So item appearance will go back to image, let's see, image or list item. There's the default one. So we have header text, footer text, item text, and the accessory. Okay, and you can see over here in the structure panel as well. But I can, as I change this, list view item appearance. So the edit appearance is when the list view is in edit mode. So that brings up like toggle edit mode. So in edit mode, it's going to have accessory over here to delete it, a checkbox. So let's see. Let's see item appearance, and we're going to change the item appearance back to item button right. Okay, so there we go. So this has got an image here and a button on the right. So we're going to make that image bigger and move it around. So we can rearrange this stuff in here however you want to make this laid out what works best for you. So I'll run this now, populate that. So now the images are a little bigger now. But really want those images to be a lot bigger. So we're going to come here and say item height. Make the item height 100. List view design mode. There we go. Items has to relay it back out by that new item height. And let's make that image really big and move the text down here so it's in the middle. And now I run it and populate that list. And look at that, we got those big old images in there now. Okay. Oh, I don't have the... So now I'm going to show you the second button here, what we're doing. So I'm going to go back here to the item appearance, and I'm going to change it to a different mode. We have dynamic appearance. So dynamic appearance, this is really, really cool. I can click here, and it goes back to this kind of plain, boring one. But if I select the item, you see this have this plus here, add item. So let's say I want to add a image object, and I'll add a second image object. And so what this does, allows us to do, is we can actually add whatever we want to, or not whatever we want to. We can change this around. We can have multiple images in here. Oops, that's way too small. So here we got 2 images and text here. Now, the second button here is we're going to use this to populate it. And so now how we're populating it is, instead of saying item image index, item text, is we're saying item data, and then the name of the individual items we've added to it here. So see, we have a text 1, image 2, and image 3. Okay, so image, let's see, 3 and 2, and now we'll run this, and we'll click the second button here, and there we go. We've just populated our dynamically designed list view. This is very, very powerful. There's so much cool stuff you can do with this. You can you have events that occur when the accessory is clicked on, for example. Let's see. On button click, so the button that was there, when the user deletes it, there's, let's see, edit mode change, so you can turn edit mode on and off. Let's see, where's the item click? And delete item. So you can put it into edit mode. Actually, let's do that. We'll go edit mode. Now see, I didn't try this earlier, so now it's going to be in edit mode. And okay, there we go. There's the items. Oh, I'm in dynamic mode. Okay, sorry. See, I'm going off script. Item appearance. Let's go with just... there we go, that one. And we're in edit mode, so now I have the option to select things and delete them. Okay, so it deletes them from the list automatically. But we can have events that occur. See, what had the event on here? Event, delete item. So you can get that. You can go deleting item, and this gives you the option to can delete, so you can cancel it. You can have a prompt. Hey, are you sure you want to delete this? And if they say yes or no, you can have them not be able to delete it. So there we go. Very cool stuff you can do here with the list view. It's a very, very powerful component to display data to your users. And like I said, it's optimized around being able to scroll very fast. Now let's talk about animations. Animations allow you to modify property values over a duration. So you attach an animation to a property's value, and you set a duration, you set a minimum, a maximum, and a few other properties, and it will, when that animation gets activated, it will change the value over time. You can optionally set a delay, a loop, inverse. You can set triggers, for example, when the user mouse is over control, you can have an animation kick in and do something. These are really, really powerful, and you can do a lot of stuff with them without having to write any code. One note, and this is kind of just a little idiosyncrasy. It's not a bug. Some people are like, oh, that's not right. Well, that's just the way it works, and when you understand the way it works, you realize it makes sense. But if you have 2 controls and you want to animate them both to stay next to each other, for example, then you need to have one animation component animating both of them. And so on the event of the animation, you want to have it changing properties on both. If you have 2 different ones and set the duration and the minimum max the same, because of the way they both work, they're both they're not aware of each other, and so they're both running in their own thread and doing the animation, and they'll ever so slightly get out of sync because they're not aware of each other. They don't know they need to be synchronized, and so they'll just be doing their animation. And eventually you'll notice these are not synced up. So if you want to have something in sync, then you need to use a single T-animate in order to pin those values together. Like a single T-float animation. Like I said, most of the time, probably not going to notice that, but it's only in those one scenarios when you want to have two controls animated in sync. When you're doing animation, there's a property called interpolation. Now, interpolation determines how the rate of the value changes over time. So the simplest example of this would be, is it going to be linear, where it's just a consistent rate of change? Or is it going to be a rate of change where it starts out slow and gets faster and then slows back down again, which gives it kind of a physical momentum to it, if you will, right? So momentum says objects at rest tend to stay at rest, object in motion tend to stay at motion. So by using one of the interpolations, what it does is it gives it this, and setting the animation type to in out, then what happens is the object on the screen will start moving slowly and then get moving faster and faster and faster and then slow back down again. And then that gives it that inertia, that physical momentum to make it feel like it's an actual object moving that has mass, as opposed to if you just stick it to linear, then it's going to move at a constant rate. So most of the time, you probably use other animation systems that will have a ease in and out option. That's what interpolation lets you do. But interpolation is more flexible in that you can set it to different types of interpolation, including things like elastic and circular and bounce, which gives it some more erratic type behavior. So it just more effective. You have quadratic is probably the most common one you'll probably use, but you have lots of options to choose from here as far as different ways to have it interpolate. There's over 40 GPU powered effects. These are not including transitions we'll talk about later, that you can apply to any FireMonkey control. So these can be like drop shadows, glows. There's over 40 of them. It's just really boggling all the different effects in there. You can do so many cool things. It's almost like having Instagram filters built into your application. And you can easily add any of these to any control or any image. Very cool. It can optionally trigger on events. So for example, you could take a button, you could add a drop shadow effect to it and say, when the mouse is over this button, trigger the drop shadow. And that's it. And then when the user mouse is over it at runtime, the button gets a drop shadow. So just like the animations, you can have these triggers on it. Very, very flexible. You can do a ton of stuff without code. Actually, the first time I saw some examples, I was messing with some examples on this, I'm like, wow, my goodness. And I was looking at a demo that had all these animations and all these effects. And I go to look for the code and there's no code. There was no code because all of this is done through properties and components. So I'll show you how all this works. Transition effects, there's over 20 of these, and they're a subset of regular effects, but they change a parent image or control into a target image. And so it's an image, so you want to use make screenshot to get the target image. And so what you'll do is you'll say make screenshot of what I want the screen to look like, and then I'll transition this control into that target image, and it will transition over time. So it could be like a fade or a wavy effect or whatever. There's lots of different things you can do. So this would be similar to like if you're doing a presentation like PowerPoint and you have some sort of transition between your two slides. That's what you can do with transition effects. So there's over 20 of them. There's quite a few. What you can do with it. There's actually a page curl, which I made a effect that looks like a book turn where you can actually grab it with the mouse and turn it, which I'll show you here in a little bit to transition it. This is the shader filters sample that we ship with Delphi Starter Edition. Well, all versions of Delphi. So let's go ahead and run this here. And what this does is you can actually go through and select some of these samples here and apply, or shaders filters, and apply them and see what they would look like. So see here, we can bump up the contrast and brightness on this image. Now this is using my GPU to accelerate this and apply these effects really quick. Let's see, blur, box blur, directional blur. We can affect the amount. Ooh, that's giving me a headache. Gaussian blur, radial blur. So this one is I can set the center point on this one, see? Color, invert colors, distortions, pinch, magnify. The smooth magnify, this one's actually kind of cool. Swirl, wave, warp. This can just generate, it fills it with a color. Geometry, we can crop it. I don't even know what some of these things do. Oh, wow. That's cool. Oh, my goodness. I didn't even know that was there. I'm not sure what that one does. These are cool. It's pencil sketch, pencil stroke, inner glow. That isn't very interesting. Emboss, sharpen. Some of these, for example, these look better on when you're doing them on controls. Sepia, sharpen. You can change the sharpen amount. Cartoon. This looks kind of like a comic book is really what that looks like. Tiler. This will turn it into tiles. And then transitions. So transitions are the effects specifically for doing transitions between images. So this one is going to play. So this is doing a transition. See that between, it's a blind transition. So it's like it's opening, closing the blinds. The magnify transition, play. Whoop, whoop. Drop transition. So again, these are like transitions you might use in a slideshow. Pixelate transition. So this is one you've probably seen. This was really popular in video, TV, and such like that for a while. Here we go. This has a shape that kind of comes out. Swipe. This is a traditional one, right? This is kind of not too crazy. Just going to swipe down. Oh, that's right. We got to move the cursor down here. The page curl. So this is the one I actually used to make a page curl effect where you can turn pages. As you can see, I mean, that's really almost what we have here with this guy is a page turn. All I did is I said that as soon as you moved it past here, it just uses an animate to finish the movement, the turn process. Water. Ooh. There we go. So this is really useful. You can come in here and see what some of the different effects are, the transitions are. And then once you find them in here, go into the IDE, find the effect that you want to apply, and apply it. So benchmark is where it will run it for a while and figure out how long it takes to do the effect, the transition, as far as, and that's a way of benchmarking the performance if you're concerned about how long it's going to take to do that. So you can compare the wiggle transition versus the swipe transition. See, they're both about the same. Yeah, and that's probably just, it's a function of, because they're all running against my GPU. Which, the cool thing is, I'm actually in a virtual machine right now, so that's a virtualized GPU, and it's still very, very, very fast. Frames are a really powerful, very advanced tool that you can use in building user interface. What they are is they allow you to create a usable piece of user interface, almost like creating a component, but you do it visually. And so what you do is you can take a frame, you create a frame, and you put down some controls, and you click on those buttons and edit boxes, and you write code behind it, and then you save that frame. And then in your application, you can say, okay, I want to put this frame in here, and then put that same frame over here in this other place, and you can reuse this frame in multiple places throughout your application. So, for example, let's say you're doing a data entry system, and you find yourself frequently collecting an address. All right, so you standardize, hey, whenever I'm collecting an address, I need a street 1, street 2, a city, state, zip, country, whatever, right? So whatever it is you decided to standardize on the way you want to collect an address, you put that in a frame. And so every time you need an address, you just drop that frame down. And it's going to be exactly the same, look exactly the same, but it's reusable in different scenarios. So in this place, you pull the data out and you're going to put it in customer address. This place, you're going to put it in supplier address. This place, you're going to put it someplace else. And it's got all the behaviors and all the layout already taken care of in the frame. Now, yesterday, Marco talked about the parallel programming library, but I just want to reiterate this today, is that it's really important that you use T-tasks from the parallel programming library to prevent your UI from freezing. So anytime you're going to do something in your main thread, so when you click on a button and you write code, that's all in the main thread, in the UI thread. Anytime you're going to do something that could potentially have a slowdown, and that could be something that requires a network access, so calling, connecting to a socket, to a remote server, anything that's going to be a file read, could be a really big file, could take a while. Anything like that, you want to put into a T-task or a T-future. And the reason is because that's going to put it into a separate thread. And so that keeps your UI from freezing. And so then your UI can check and say, hey, is this done? What's going on? And not have the UI freeze. And so what happens is if you put it in the main thread, the UI will freeze and it'll become non-responsive, and Windows will pop up and say, whoa, hey, this app's not responding, and the user will get frustrated and think something's wrong. But in reality, it's just taking a long time to load this big file, or the network's really slow and it's taking a while to connect to this remote server. Whatever the situation is, you don't want your users to freak out. And so by using a T-task, and maybe you could put a progress bar that could strobe back and forth and say, hey, I'm busy, something's going on, then the user knows what's happening. But if you just do it in the main UI thread, then everything freezes, the progress bar freezes, everything freezes, and the user gets frustrated. So put it in a T-task or a T-future. Marco talked about it yesterday. There's more information at those links there in order to keep your UI responsive. Styles. These are so cool, and these are available both in VCL and FireMonkey. They're just implemented differently. This is a great way to make your UI stand out, look really slick, create a consistent look across the application. So you can take it, you can leave it with a default style, and it's going to look native on Windows, or you can customize the style and give it a totally custom look and feel. Or you can do something in between where you customize the existing Windows style in order to add some different elements to it. Very, very flexible. We ship with a number of default styles. There's some premium styles available as well that you can really expand the way your application looks. These are all done on FireMonkey, done with the T-style book. So you put down a T-style book, you go to the form and set the form's style book to this T-style book. In the T-style book, you load the new style in, and it applies it to your form.
I am Daniele Teti, CIO of Bittime Professionals. My last book, Delphi Cookbook 2nd edition, has been published in June 2016 and contains more than 60 recipes about Delphi for desktop, server, web, and mobile development. I'm quite happy to say that just after 30 days, the book became the bestseller in its category. It is 470 pages long and is updated to Delphi 10.1 Berlin. For those of you which already have the first edition, consider that this second edition has more than 1/3 of brand new contents. In this section, we'll talk about a specific recipe contained in the book, with the title Reinventing Your Graphic User Interface, also known as Mastering FireMonkey Control Shapes and Effects. So let's start and talk about the specific recipe of the Delphi Cookbook 2nd edition. As you have surely understood at this point, FireMonkey is a completely new graphic library, which allows a completely new way to think about your graphic user interface. Consider that during my FireMonkey training, one of the first exercises that I give to the class is, please look for the strangest FireMonkey control in the tool palette. It is quite a strange exercise, but the reason is really important. You must realize as soon as possible that FireMonkey is not a cross-platform VCL. It is a new beast with new possibilities and new things to know. So you have to rethink your GUI architecture, because many patterns used in the last 5, 10, 15 or more years of VCL development now may be simply obsolete or are no more the best things to do. For instance, you have to display a pie chart with some user interaction and some nice visual effect. When the user moves the mouse over a pie slice, the slice gets highlighted and some information is shown to the user. How can you achieve that? In VCL, there are two ways: write your own code, a lot of code, or use a third-party control. In FireMonkey, there is also a third way: use the primitive shapes to create it using no third-party controls and a very little amount of code. This is a recurring pattern in FireMonkey. This is the reason because probably your FireMonkey application needs a lot fewer third-party controls than the VCL one. To show you how this is possible, in this recipe we will create a simple pie chart with such aspect and user behavior. Here's how the project will act. We have a list of companies in this grid: Google, Apple, Yahoo, Twitter, Facebook, with some units sold, and then clicking this button, refresh pie chart, we get a nice pie chart. Let's see how this pie chart works. Is there resizable? It gets highlighted when I move the mouse over it, as you see. Is drawn with a nice gradient. Let's see, here is lighter and this is darkened. And here in the bottom you can see where you are moving the mouse cursor. So this is Google, Twitter, Apple, Yahoo, Facebook, and so on, with absolute value and percentage value. So I can, for example, change the Facebook quote from 7 to 20, and then click refresh pie chart, and automatically the pie is updated. I can also add a new line and put, for example, EMBT, and put something like 15. Refresh pie chart, and a brand new slice with a new color has been added to the cake, let's say, to the pie. Okay? Let's see how we can build such program. So just before start to see how the receipt code is built, let's see what is the trips behind it to understand how the FireMonkey control works together. The trips behind this receipt is based on T-layout and T-pipe control. So I can put here a T-layout, and then I can stack a lot of T-pipe controls inside the T-layout. This T-pipe must be aligned at contents, and here's a new, let's say, slice of the pie. And then I can create another pipe here, copy and paste here, and then I can, for example, change the end angle, for example 0, and start angle 90. I can also, for example, change the color, and that's my pie chart. Obviously, this is the tricks behind this mechanism, but we have to do a dynamic structure, a dynamic control creation to create this mechanism with a lot of effect and so on. Let's talk about the original receipt. We open the pie chart project, that's it, and check what's under the form create event. As you see, we call randomize, create an pre-dictionary, a generic dictionary containing string as key and extended as value, then set up some grid properties, and then put into the grid some random data. That's it. This is a simple initialization. So the interesting things happen. This is a normal layout. Interesting things happen behind this refresh pie chart event handler. The first things we do is called load data, passing the data dictionary. Load data is quite simple. It simply reads from the grid, from the user interface, convert the values from string to extended, and then populate a local dictionary with the company names and the units sold. Then we are calculating the running total, simply looping through the dictionary using a t-pair type, using string and extended, and we are simply add the total value for each company. Then we have to remove all the t-pair already present into the layout, because we could click the button many times. And then here there is the matrix, let's say. For each element in the data dictionary, we are going to calculate the degree proportionally to the total value and the value of this specific slice, and then call build pipe slice. This build pipe slice is a builder design pattern, let's say, which create a t-pipe, child of layout pipe, and it hooks also some event handler, for example, mouse enter, mouse leave. Then set the tag strings with the identifier of the company, set the parent, and also align the newly created pipe to the contents. Let's see what the t-pipe enter, t-pipe leave does. On pipe enter, simply bring to front the pipe, read the tag strings and all the information behind it, calculate the percentage value, and then write on the company, on the label company on the bottom of the form, the information about the company and the percentage value. On pipe leave, we are going simply to reset the label. Let's go back to what the button does. The current angle is set to the start angle property of the pipe, while the end angle is set to the current angle plus the grad angle calculated at the first line. So we have the current angle as a sum between the current angle and the last calculated angle. Then we get a specific color with this getColor passing an index. This getColors simply initiates an array of colors using let's say a simple algorithm to choose sequentially one of these 6 colors expressed as hexadecimal color. As you see, the first byte is the alpha channel, and then these 3 bytes are expressing the color. After we get the color for the slice, we can set up the gradient, passing the fill property of each pipe with the reference color. This setup gradient simply set the kind of the brush of the pipe to as gradient, and then the color, the reference color, is the calculated color, while the color 1, which is the end gradient color, is a bit darker than the reference color, using this function getDarkerColor by %, passing reference colors and a % value. What this function calculate, simply use interpolate color. This function, interpolate color, return an intermediate color between the first passed color and the second passed color, considering a value between 0 and 1. This is used a lot in the bitmap animation classes of FireMonkey, this interpolate color. In fact, this interpolate color is into the FMX utils units, but it's really useful and simple to use because we can make a darker color simply passing black as a destination color, or we can, for example, here get a lighter color simply passing white as a target color and passing the percentage we want to reach. Going back, after setup gradient for each pipe, we can inject specific effect. We still passing the pipe and the color for the this LREF color inject effect. We are going to add a couple of three effects. We are going to add an inner glow effect on the pipe, which is triggered when the mouse is over the pipe, with some opacity, softness, and so on. And then adding a color animation, which is applied only to the stroke color property, quindi only the stroke, the border of the pipe is affected, and we are going to make a lighter color on the border when you pass over. And then we apply an animation also on the stroke thickness. So we are going to add a glow effect, this glowing on the pipe, add a mouse over effect on the stroke.color, and add a mouse over effect on the stroke thickness. So the border is get highlighted and some effect will rise. And then simply increase the index to create the next color. And then call end update. Remember to call begin update and end update to get faster performance. Okay? That's it. That's it. What FireMonkey allows you to that. Simply using with some skill, it's the property also of the most simple control. Okay. As you can see, writing user interface in FireMonkey is a completely new things about when you compare it to the VCL mechanism. Is a completely new things to grasp and to understand. If you wanna buy the book, you can buy the book on the the shop on the web. The editor is PactPub and is available. The book is available in its own shop, and then the book is also available on Amazon, iTunes, Book, O'Reilly, and others ebook shop. So thank you for the attention, and have a good time at the Delphi bootcamp. Bye bye.
When I rendered the video we just watched, I realized I missed a few pieces here. So these were supposed to be in the video, but they didn't get injected in there. So I'm going to go ahead and play these now for you, and we'll do the Q&A shortly. Most of the time when I'm creating a new FireMonkey application, I just choose regular blank application. But right now I'm going to show you how to do 3D application. FireMonkey has a full rich set of 3D functionality. It's all GPU rendered for performance. So let's go ahead and show you how this works. One thing you want to know about is it's called the T-dummy. Now, T-dummy is a point of reference, I guess you could call. And so what you can do is you can parent other controls to the T-dummy, in order to have a reference. It's not visible. If I run this right now, you'll see nothing because the T-dummy doesn't have any visibility. There's nothing to it. But you can use the T-dummy, like I said, you parent things to it in order to have a point of reference. So let's go ahead and put a couple spheres down. There's one sphere, and it's parented to the T-dummy. So let's go ahead and move it off the T-dummy. So there's the T-dummy. There's my first sphere. And I'll just go to copy and paste and put another one on there. Not it actually parented to the other one because FireMonkey, anything can parent anything. And on 3D, it just lets you put things wherever. So let's put that one here. So there we go. I have two spheres, and they're parented to T-dummy. So what that means is if I move T-dummy, it moves the spheres around. Now you're going to notice these interesting little handles here. And these are what I can use to actually rotate the objects around. Okay. So since those are parented to it, I can move this and it rotates the ones that are parented to it. Now, if I run this right now, all you'll see is the two red spheres. Okay, but no interaction. So let's go ahead and make this guy a little bigger here. So I'm going to say width, we'll say 5, and height 5, 5. Okay, so now that's a bit bigger. And we're going to give this, so there's dummy, we can move these around. Oops, wrong one. Dummy, there we go. So let's give them some texture. Now there's more than one texture material source. What am I missing here? Oh, material. So I want to give them a material. There's a texture material source, color material source, and a light material source. A light material source is what you want to use if you want to have it affected by light. All right, so let's go ahead and put down another light material source. And let's get rid of the texture material source. I grabbed the wrong one to begin with. So I have two light material sources, and I'll put down a light. So this light is going to shine light on these objects for me. All right, so now let's put a texture on this. So go to the texture material source. I'm going to load up a bitmap here. Load of the Earth. And then on the other one, I'm going to put the moon. Load the moon. And now I'll assign these to material source 1 and material source 2. So we have the Earth and the moon. Now on my light, if I move this around, hopefully you can see how that changes the way it affects these spheres. So I can run this, but at this point, it's really just a 2D picture. I mean, this could be a circle for all intents and purposes, right? Not very interesting. So let's put some movement in here. So I'm going to do that with animations. So I'm going to put an animation on the dummy, the T-dummy here. So let's go here, and I'm just going to say animation, and I want a float animation. And the float animation is on T-dummy, and the property I want to animate is rotation angle Y. And we want to go 0 to 359. And the reason I'm going only at 359 and not 360 is because 360 and 0 are the same. And so if I go 0 to 360, then it'll actually do that one position as it loops again. And so it'll have just a slight hiccup. So you go 0 to 359. We're going to say loop enabled. Where's enabled? There's enabled. And give it a duration of 3 seconds, because I don't want to get nauseous from it spinning too fast. Now I run it, and look at that. Our Earth, so right now the dummy's rotating. Okay, so you notice that the same part of the Earth's always facing the moon. So we want to make the Earth rotate as well, and we'll do that with another animation, another float animation, and this one you'll see is on sphere 1, and the property name is also rotation angle Y, although you could rotate it on any angle you wanted to. And again, we're going to say 0 to 59, or you could say 1 to 360, but I like 0 to 59. And we'll do this over 2 seconds. Loop enabled. enabled. And again, you could do this with triggers as well if you wanted to, so it only rotated when the mouse was over it, for example. So now the Earth is rotating as the moon rotates the Earth. Although technically they're rotating around a point right here in the middle, right? The T-dummy. So probably the better way to do it, if you really wanted to have an accurate model, would be to put the moon parented. There we go. Let's just go ahead and do that right now, right? So there we go. The moon is parented now to the Earth. And so now, woo! Okay, maybe that's not accurate. I don't know. I'm not a astrophysicist, and I don't claim this to be a accurate representation of the behavior of the Earth. Yeah, I know it's not, because it's always facing over the ocean there. See, moon's always over the same part of the planet, and that's not accurate, because I know the moon sometimes visible here and sometimes is not. So anyway, kind of give you a little idea. That's actually making me nauseous now. Give you an idea of what you can do with some of this 3D. There's a whole bunch of 3D scene. We have a camera, which you can use to change cameras, points of view angles. There's the T-dummy. Bunch of different shapes, bunch of primitives, discs, cubes, meshes, spheres, cones, rectangles, ellipse 3D model, and then 3D layers as well. So a lot of great stuff you can do here with 3D, and this is just a quick sample, quick look at this. But I just want to point out a couple of those useful elements. The T-dummy. The T-dummy is one of the ones that I started playing with, and I wasn't aware of what that was at first. And someone said, just use a T-dummy. I'm like, oh my goodness, this is exactly what I needed. So it's a great way. For example, let's say you wanted to build a complex thing and you wanted to move that complex thing around, you could just build it around the T-dummy. Actually, I'll show you here. I didn't point this out. The Z position is how far it is from the camera. So if I go -10, see it's closer, 10 is further from the camera. So that's useful to know as well. All right, there you go. Go out and do some awesome stuff in 3D with FireMonkey. Show you really quick how to use frames. Now, on the tool palette, you'll see right here, it says frames. If I add this on here, it says there are no frames. So what I need to do is come in here, and the easiest way, and what I usually do is come in here, right click and say add new, other, Delphi projects, Delphi files, FireMonkey frame, and we've created a frame. Now it looks just like the form, except I have that label on there. So I'm just going to put a button down here so that we can see the button. And I'm going to put some code on this button. So when I double click on it, show message clicked. Now on here, if I go back to the tool palette and add a frame, it says select the frame to insert. Now I've only got one frame, so I should insert that one frame. And here we go. Here's our frame with that button on it. And I can insert multiple copies of this. There we go. When I run it, the functionality is there behind each of those buttons. Now the cool thing is I can actually interact with these buttons in here, change them around, and even, now if I look here, on click, there's no on click event handler, even though I added one in the frame. But if I double click in here to add one, what it does is it says, okay, there was an event handler that needs to be called. And so it calls into frame 1, button 1 click. So this is going to call into the frame. So if I run this right now, so there's no code for the other one. If I run this right now and click this button, it still behaves the way it did before. But I can override this by commenting that out if I want to, or I could leave it commented in. Show message override. And so, we've changed it. This one still has the old behavior clicked. This one now has override. So great ways to create reusable bits of layout with code, with behavior in there that can then be used and then customized in the future to create really flexible maximum productivity for you. and that's frames. This is some animation effects and transition samples I've built that I'll give you the source code link to these. Go ahead and run these, and then I'll show you how they work. So this one, as I mouse, if I click this, it horizontally scrolls. Now you notice how it starts out slow and gets faster? That's because of the interpolation. This one goes vertically, and that's linear. You notice how it just goes constant speed. This guy here, as I mouse over him, he scales. Obviously. It gets really big. Over here, I'm using a color animation on this rectangle. So when I tap it, it animates to the color I just selected. So so this just creates a nice smooth transition between colors. Here, I've created there's two things I'm showing here. The first is this is a path animation. So this thing's going to go around the path animation, but then there's also a what component this was here. This is a path. Okay, a T-path and a T-path animation. All right, so the path animation is applied to the rectangle, and they both use the same path data. So the box is going to follow the path that is drawn here. Now, I don't have to have the path visible, so I can check this in. I could remove the path actually altogether. Let's do that. Now if I run this, it's still running, so I got to close it. Run. It's still going to follow that path, but you can't tell what it's drawing here because the path isn't visible. So that's why that guy's there. So you can see the box going around here. So this is actually kind of cool because now it's behind it. That's interesting. But you could have it, you can use this for drawing, moving along any kind of path that you wanted to. Now the path data I got from this SVG file that is on Wikimedia. And so you can just come in here and let's move this rectangle to the front. Control, Control, send back. Now he's in the front. So the path data right here, I got this like from an SVG. So any place or XAML, this is kind of a general standard. And if you go look inside an SVG file, you'll find an XML node in there that says path, and you'll see something that looks like this. And that's data you grab, and it just explains what the path data looks like, what the lines, how the lines go, and stuff like that. You can use tools like Inkscape, for example, to create these yourself. So the cool thing, if you saw there, it gives you a preview. And so this here, the T-path has the same. Where's it at? There it is, path data. The same data in here. So the cool thing is you can see a preview, which is nice that you're able to see that as you're editing. If you're editing this, chances are you're not going to edit this directly. You're going to use Inkscape or some other tool, maybe Adobe Illustrator, for example, to create this using, drawing it or whatever. So that's path animation. So in this case here, this animation is triggered. Actually, when the rectangle's clicked, right there, path animation start. So on this one, this guy here has a float animation on him, and he's triggered when is checked as true. So the float animation is on the checkbox, and is checked as true. It's quintic, which is a pretty. You saw how that looked like, the interpolation looked like, and it's a different type of acceleration. If you play with that, you'll see the different types of acceleration, and it's in and out, which means it starts out slow, gets fast, and then slows back down again. So this changes the X position when it's checked, and then inverse checks the inverse when it's unchecked. So actually, if I do this, and I don't know if I can, Oops, I didn't get it. Technically, if you clicked it while it was in the right time, it would. Yeah, I'm not getting it. If you're able to click it right at the right time, it should stop the animation and stop the animation and go the other direction. Now the scale one, you notice I have two animations on it here. One is scale X, and one is scale Y, and that's because I have to scale it in both directions. Otherwise, it would just either get wide or tall. So two animations on that, and that's on his mouse over. And let's see, the rectangle has a, this one, okay, that's right. On this one, I have a click event on it, and I'm doing this in code. So I could do it with the float animation on the rectangle, but I said do it in code. And so what we do here is we just get the animator, T animator, and we say animate color. You could do animate color, animate float, etc. And we tell it what we want to animate it on, which is the rectangle. We're going to animate the rectangle's fill color. And this is the start, the duration, the type, the animation type, and the interpolation. And there you go. So that's how you do it. Now that's actually the only code in here. So all the other animations you saw here was done without code, which is pretty cool, really. So let's take a look at this effect sample I did. And we'll run it. So this one is a magnifier. See that? So you move this around and it magnifies the what's under there. And this is using the smooth magnifier, which I thought was kind of cool. Oh, and actually there's something else I want to show you here. If I uncheck it, it turns the magnifier off. But see, this has got a glow on it when I mouse over this guy here. And the cool thing here, and I want to point it out here on this, as well as on here, is this one, you see the shadow. The shadow actually is based off of the checkbox, the text and everything here, and the glow is around the lines. And so this effect is applied to the way it's drawn, the way the control is drawn. So let's show you how this is done. Again, there's the only code here is on the right here, the mouse move, and that moves the center point of the smooth magnify effect. So also one thing I'm doing here is layout 2 visible. So layout 2 is over the top of all this with this guy is on top of that layout. And so the reason I did that is layout 2 prevents anything else from being acted upon. So the smooth magnify effect is on layout 1. So if I turn this off here, I'll show you. It's easier to explain if I just show it to you. So I'm going to make layout 2 not become visible. And so, oh, that's right. The layout 2 is what is getting the event handler, the mouse move. Layout 2, mouse move. All right. So by having layout 2 visible, it gets the mouse movement to move the magnify effect around. Now you could turn off hit test on all these so that the mouse movement went to the first layout, but I just thought it'd be easier to put a layout 2 over the top. So there's a few ways you could deal with that to capture that mouse information, or you could capture the mouse information from all the controls and map it out. But this is the simple way to do it. And that's it. So for this guy here, he has a glow effect and a shadow effect both on him. So the glow effect is triggered by mouse over. So when mouse over, it glows. When the mouse goes off, it doesn't glow. And I'm using the fabulous fuchsia. The shadow effect, here with the shadow color is black, but you could again change this color to bisque or whatever you want to do. Let's go back to black. And direction, distance, all that's customizable. And then the scroll box here is also has a shadow effect on it there as well. So that's the effects sample. Here's the transition sample. This one's actually pretty cool. I'm pretty happy with this one. So what we've got going on here is there's a tab. This is a tab sheet, and there's animation going on here just so you can see this movement. And so when I use the button, the switch button here, it's going to switch between the two tabs with the transition effect. So watch the animation keep going here as it transitions. See that? That's really cool. And so I can actually type in here. I don't know if you could see the text as I was. If it was a little slower, you could see it. Anyway, hopefully you saw that. So the control is in effect there. So let me show you how the code works on this one. There's a little bit more code here on this one. So on the switch button, so the transition effect is on the tab control. Tab item has a transition effect. See that? And the transition effect is the rotate crumble transition effect. And we enable it. Now, I set the random seed, which is just the seed is what's used to determine how the transition takes effect. And I changed the parent. And so what happens is I'm using the same transition effect from both, even though there's only one transition effect on here. So I just reparent it to the other control and enable it. And then start the float animation. So the float animation is on the transition effect. And the float animation runs through the progress. Okay? So the transition effect has a progress, and that progress is how far through the transition it's going. And the float animation is being used to increment the progress from 0% to 100%. And so we start the float animation, and it runs through the progress. When it finishes, then we just disable the transition effect. We change the active tab. So if it was on 1, we change it to 2. If it was on 2, to change it to 1. And then on process here, what we're doing is I'm actually going through and getting a screenshot of the layout and setting that as the target of the transition effect. And so what this does, this gives it the updating as it's going. So as it's going, it updates. So see, we're saying if tab controls active tabs 1, then we get the tab 2 layout and we make a screenshot. So each tab has a layout on it. Okay, that's on the tab, and we use that, go to that layout and get the screenshot, make screenshot, which is going to get the image of that as a bitmap, and then we assign that to the target of the transition effect in order to update that. On create, this just switches active tabs in order to create the controls, because by default it doesn't create the controls on the other tab until it's actually visible. So that's just a workaround for that. Anyway, there you go. Little cool transition effect there. You don't need, if you don't want to have the updating of the animations, you can leave this part out, and you can do it. You could put different transition effects on each tab and stuff like that as well. So now I'll show you the page turn sample I put together. So this one I'm using prototype bind source just to get some lorem ipsum data. That this is filled in, and then I insert some page numbers on here so you can see what page number we're on. Now right now it's only set up to be able to be turned from the upper right hand corner, but you could probably do that. I don't think I have it. Yeah, it doesn't go backwards yet, but you could easily adapt the code to make it go the other direction. So this has got a lot more code to it. Essentially, and actually I did this, and then I looked at some other devices that had page curls, and I'll point something out here on this one. You'll notice here on page 1, page 2, and then when I start turning the page, so if I start turning the page and I'll go part way, it goes back. See that? But you'll notice the text here on the back is page 3, page 2, page 3. I looked at some other things that have page scroll effects. They're not near this complicated. They usually have one page, and you turn the page, and you're done. But essentially what I'm doing here is I'm getting screenshots of these different memos. So there's 2 visible memos and then 2 memos that are behind it. And I'm doing make screenshot to get the memos, and I assign those to the transition effect, which is layout visible. So the layout visible is on the front, layout virtual is behind it, and I'm using layout virtual to lay out what the inverse side is going to be flipped to. So here's the swipe animation, and I have some stuff on mouse move. So this fills the memos with lorem ipsum. So mouse down, this is going to start the, so this goes and gets the screenshot from the layout virtual, flips it horizontally in order to get the reverse size, and then assigns it to the back of the swipe. See that? And then we bring layout visible to the front. So real quick, we just switch them around to get the screenshot of the page returning to. And on mouse move, we just set the mouse point on the swipe as long as the left button is held down. Is when you let go of the mouse, we just finish the turn, and finish the turn is going to look to see, where's it at here? Finish turn. We're going to look to see if we're more than half, or more than a quarter of the way, I think it is. Yeah, more than a quarter of the way. And then if you are, then we'll do an animation going forward. If we're not, we'll do an animation going back. That's really it. Like I said, you have all the codes, so you can look through this. This took me a while to figure out. Like I said, I ended up making it a lot more complicated than I needed to, because I didn't realize that most computer app things that have page curls don't bother rendering the back page or 2 pages side by side. It was kind of fun. I was playing around with the transition sample, and I was like, oh, I could do a page scroll. And so I figured this out. And now it's time for your questions.
Let's see. There was a question early on about when you're using anchors and so on, can you specify as a percentage of time, a percentage of size? And anchors are just physical positions, right?
Yeah, so you can do some scaled layout and stuff like that, and you may be able to get something by nesting a few different layouts in there to do some scaling, but I'm not positive if you can do it offhand at design time, but you can certainly do it in code. And there's been times I've done that in code, something similar to that in code, but I don't think you can do that at design time.
Let me look. There was an early question about could they have a form that is an irregular shape, and the way I do that with FireMonkey is I set transparency to true, and then the form disappears, and the only thing that shows up are your visual components that you put on. So transparency is set to false by default on a FireMonkey form, but if you set it to true, then it becomes the transparent color, and you just have buttons sitting there hanging in space, or somebody wanted like a state of the United States, for example, in a regular shape, where you could use there's a T path, which is a 2D path where you can draw an area and color it and do things to it, just as Jim showed T path 3D, for 3D FireMonkey. So it is possible to have an irregular shape by using just setting transparency to true on your main form, or on any form for that matter. Let's see. I wasn't sure. There were some questions about alignments when objects are incompatible with alignments, and I was thinking maybe that was related more to, again, layouts in different sizes and form factors. And since this was the starter edition, right, Jim, we're just talking about Win32 right now, but on Friday, there are different form factors and different layouts that you can set up, and then using anchors, alignments, and layouts together will really help you work in all the different form factors that are related to mobile development, tablets versus smartphones and so on. And I think, Jim, you'll probably show on Friday how to use these different views besides the master view. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. But for now, again, in Win32, you can still define a custom layout. There are 2 defined layouts in the IDE for Starter Edition, regular Windows itself, and then the Surface Pro, which is Microsoft's tablet. And that can be oriented in landscape or portrait mode. So there was a question about how to change the size of all elements inside of a form when you change something. And there is a array. So look on the form, and whatever your name of your form is, form1.components, and in there's an array of components. There's also a component count, and you could iterate through the components array. It's a property of a form, and you can test to see what type each of those components are. So for example, if you want to resize all the buttons or change it relates to a question about a localization, for example. If someone wanted to change the text property of all the buttons in the user interface of an application to Russian or German or French or whatever, you could have string resources or files out there as part of your application, and you could iterate through the components array, and every button you would see just set its text property to something you read from a database or from some local file or whatever. There are third-party localization products as well that basically do the same thing for VCL and FireMonkey applications. They iterate through the component array under the covers, and/or you could process the form file as text and go search for anything that's got a text property and replace it with something else. But if you wanted to do something on your own, like Jim was mentioning, for doing resizing of an application in code, again, you can iterate through the form1.components using the component count and look for everything that has a certain type and a certain property. And that would be a way to do things at runtime, to do dynamic operations. Some developers create forms completely dynamically at runtime using code and/or form descriptor type systems. But yeah, view form as text, and then you can right mouse click in the text editor in the IDE and then say view form as, or if view the form again and get back to the visual design surface.
So I did update the blog post for day 3. It includes a link to the samples I was showing right there when the video cut out, as well as the slides. I will update with some more details later today as well. I'll go ahead and paste the link in here in the chat window for anybody that didn't get a chance to grab it earlier.
Yeah.
And you can grab that. It's going to have all the, we'll later on have some more details on it.
And Daniele Teti, I know for his book, I think he has a GitHub as well. I'll find that URL, or you can just search for Daniele Teti GitHub Delphi Cookbook, for example, and he's got his samples up on GitHub. There was a question about, are we going to put all our samples on GitHub? I mean, that's the plan, the samples for the product. Right now they're on SourceForge, right?
Correct.
Yeah. When you were in the layout section, there were questions about what do you do if you want to scroll around in a layout, whether it's a grid panel layout or a flow layout. You can parent, the thing about FireMonkey is you can parent anything to anything. So you could have a flow layout or a grid panel layout that is contained inside of a scroll box, whether it's a vertical scroll box or a scroll box. You can do that in code. You can do that at design time. You can do that in the structure window. You can drag a layout into a scroll box. You could put a scroll box for a form, the whole form, or a certain section of the form. And then you could have a scrolling area, and you can turn on either horizontal or vertical scrolling or both. We do that. There's a sample that ships in the UI section for the mobile snippets. I think it's a vertical scroll box or vertical form, and that's great when you're working in a small form factor, and there'll be more about that discussion on Friday in a mobile application where you might have a form that has 5 or 6 inputs, like a settings page, for example, and you want to be able to have it automatically move up and down via code as you move from edit box to edit box, for example, or that you want to let the user scroll up and down just using their touch finger, for example. So a vertical scroll box works great in FireMonkey on a settings page that's a little bit longer, a form that's longer than the form factor, for example. So there's all the scrolling support that's available as well. You can always position components anywhere you want on a form. They could even be off screen in a sense. And then you could, in code, move the position on the on the form around. So you can hide visual and non-visual components off the form in a smaller form or form factor by setting the position X and Y somewhere over to the right or down below the visible part of the form.
Yeah, you could also do something like that with frames as well.
Yep. And there was a question down here about frames. Can you use frames? Can you reuse frames? And that's what frames are all for, right? They're sort of subsets of forms. They're another container. And you can inherit from a frame and change parts of a frame. So if you want most of what's in a frame but set some properties different, so you have all of that, just go to the documentation, to the doc wiki about frames. And frames work both in FireMonkey and VCL. They've been in VCL for a long time. But in FireMonkey, I mean, one of the points about frames in the UI part was it was one of the containers in VCL that was available. The other one is the form, the panel, and the data module. In FireMonkey, since everything can parent to everything, I'll have to resurrect my sample. I put a form inside of like a T-panel. You could put a form in. I think Stephen Ball has an example that's out there in a video. He took the cover flow example like from iTunes where you're flipping through record albums. He did that by having forms parented onto a kind of the flipping user interface, and he had different forms talking to different data and different views, and he did that by parenting a form into each of the images, or on a tab control. You could have a form. You could even put a form inside of a form by parenting one form to another. You just set the form's parent property to the thing you want to parent it to. That's the way the components work as well in FireMonkey. A button has a parent, a ListBox has a parent, a ListView has a parent, an EditBox has a parent. A form also has a parent property, so you could parent a form into a button. I'm not sure why you would do it, but you can do it. In FireMonkey, it's much more flexible that way, where everything can parent to everything else. I think in the animation section, Jim, there was a question about, and I think you showed a few examples of this. You can put multiple animations on a control, right? Because you're just animating property types, right? And then you can also put multiple.
And you could even
go ahead.
I was going to say, you can put multiple animations on the same property that have different triggers. For example, you can. It's very flexible. You probably can mess yourself up. I'm sure you can mess yourself up. Having two animations that are trying to do different things at different times or something like that on the same property. But yeah, it's very, very, very flexible in the way it works.
And then for effects, you can also apply multiple effects to an image, for example, right?
Yes, and so in the sample I showed with the effects on the controls with the magnifier, I had the switch button had a shadow and then a glow effect on it. So the shadow was always on, and then when you moused over it, it glowed in the purple, or fuchsia, I guess it was. So yeah, you can combine those. And then of course I had the magnifying over the top of both those as well. So that was 3 effects going on there, and in theory, there's no limit, but yeah.
And the FireMonkey effects use shader language for the GPU. So all of those effects are, in a sense, pre-compiled GPU shader code. If you have the professional and above, you can actually look at the source code for FireMonkey and the FireMonkey effects, and you'll see all the pre-compiled shader code that is just sent over as bytes to the GPU, and the images are placed in GPU memory as well. So all those operations Jim was showing in effects, as well as the things he was doing in 3D, that's all happening in the GPU. So your CPU is freed up to do other things while the GPU is doing a lot. In early versions of FireMonkey, going back to XE3, maybe XE4, at least XE3, the images were being transferred from CPU memory to GPU memory. In later versions, FireMonkey was optimized to push the bitmaps into GPU memory and do the operations in the GPU to save time. You can always get the image back, and Jim talked about that. If you've done an image and you've done some effects on it and you want to grab that image back, there's a runtime library, FireMonkey functions, for getting the bitmap back from the GPU and doing something with it. For example, displaying it on a user interface, saving it, or whatever. Let's see, scrolling.
Yeah, it's surprisingly easy to do those filters and effects, and like I said, you could with mobile development, you could really easily build your own Snapchat type thing. It's crazy easy to use. Actually, you know what? You can, if you have a camera on your laptop or your desktop, a webcam, you could do that with Starter Edition. I'll show that on Friday, how to grab a picture with the camera and apply some effects to it.
Yeah, and I think we've uploaded, it's probably still active in the Apple Store. I think we took our image effects example and submitted it as an application that was accepted in the store. I'll have to find that link somewhere. Someone was asking how this all works in 2D and 3D under the covers with FireMonkey, and on Windows for 2D, we use Direct2D or DirectX, the 2D part of DirectX. For 3D on Windows, we use Direct3D or the 3D parts of DirectX. And then on Mac and iOS, we use Cocoa, which is the 2D for 2D graphics image processing. And for the 3D on Mac OS, we use OpenGL ES. On Android and iOS for 3D, we use OpenGL on Mac OS for 3D, and for iOS and Android, we use OpenGL ES for 3D. For 2D on Android, we just use the native 2D API for doing controls and user interfaces. And so and you can get to the low-level context on OpenGL 3D. There's a context field. I don't think it's a published property. I think it's a public property field that you can, if you want to do some low-level OpenGL controlling, you can get at the context for the OpenGL on FireMonkey 3D. Okay.
Yeah, one of our SCs, our software engineers, or software consultants, sorry, Craig Chapman has done quite a bit with the OpenGL on mobile devices, and he's actually trying to build a little library to make it really easy to get down to the low-level OpenGL stuff. Yeah. So, yeah, if you're interested in that, look for Craig Chapman, Delphi stuff.
Yeah, there were some questions about mixing VCL and FMX if you've got some VCL code projects and you want to add some 3D. There's different resources. I pointed one to Lachlan Gemmel's tindex.net. He's got a whole index of Delphi resources that you can go, if you just go to tindex.net, and then in there's a VCL section, FireMonkey section, language section, different ones. And he's got, I put the URL in there, he's got a mixing VCL and FMX. He points to lots of different articles and videos. There's Monkey Mixer, which is a technology from Stuart Simon that's out there. I think it was, yeah. And Stephen,
then actually the Delphi Cookbook has a chapter on that as well.
Okay.
Combining the two.
Yeah. The main thing is to, for example, put your FMX forms and code in a DLL. That's one trick on Windows to do things so that you're separating out the event handlers, for example, from your VCL versus your FMX. But there's lots of resources out there about mixing. There are ways even to just put an FMX form in a VCL project. You'll get a warning, but you can say no, and in some cases that will work. But check out all the resources where people have talked about how you might start adding FMX to existing VCL. There was a question about why VCL versus FMX. I think we've talked about that a little bit during the week. If you're doing new development and you want to do Windows and multi-device, or you might want to do multi-device in the future for a new project, start with FireMonkey. If you've got existing VCL apps, you could use Media Converter to convert them. You can do manual conversions, the forms copy and pasting, they'll tell you some properties don't exist from a VCL app, and you can go and fix those. You can take your code and modify it as well. But Media Converter for Delphi will convert your VCL forms and the underlying code, and will even add live bindings to bind data that you might be using, databases you might be using. It does that in the code and in the form designer. Let's see. There was a question about media player control and putting controls on the media player control. I tried that and the media player control just takes over the screen. It's the little viewport. So you need to put your controls outside of the media control. Probably best would be to house the media player control. That's the visual surface for it inside of, for example, a panel or a layout, and then put your components, your buttons, for example, for an old style controls, like an old TV set, put those at the bottom on the right, the left, or whatever. Let's go down further. Okay. Let's see, do animations and transitions operate in their own parallel tasks, or do you have to worry about affecting it? Animations and the transitions, I mean, they're in the GPU, but they're still in the main thread, aren't they, Jim? The main application thread?
So animations have a thread that they run, and so that's why I talked about the conceivable you might get your animations out of sync if you're trying to synchronize two objects, because each animation is running in its own thread for the timing purposes. But in order to update the user interface, it has to synchronize back to the user interface. So, and then the effects are all done, and the transitions are all done in the GPU, but then they have to then reapply the effects back to the user interface, which then has to go back onto the main thread. So, yes, it is in its own thread, but it's also in the main thread because of the fact you can't update the UI from a different thread. But as far as if it's going to bog down your system or bog down your app, it shouldn't, because all the processing work is being done offloaded onto the GPU, and the only thing that's done on the main thread is updating it. I'm trying. You probably could come up with a way to mess it up, but I think you'd really have to try to maybe put some conflicting animations down or something like that. You could probably cause some problems that way, but for the most part, and I've done quite a bit with the animations, it's nice and smooth because it's all, like I said, the work is offloaded onto the GPU, and then it just updates it on the UI.
There's a question about when you're using multiple effects, and for example, the questioner wants to use a glow effect and an inner glow effect on a single control. I still think those can be run at the same time. Visually,
be able to, yeah.
Yeah.
If the two conflict with each other, like if you put an outer glow and a drop shadow, the outer glow will cover the drop shadow. But you can put an inner glow and outer glow, for example, on the same control. You'd have to look at it. It may not look the way you expect it to because you have two effects going on at the same time.
But yeah, as far as actually working, the GPU will do the work, whether you can see the work. Again, is a different story. Question about GPU requirements on mobile for 3D. The requirements are specified out on the doc wiki, but I think it's any GPU that supports shader 2.0 and greater. Pavel's really the expert. I know he's connected there, but he's lurking in the background. Pavel is the ultimate expert on GPU and 3D and FireMonkey. But the specs call for, I think we're using shader language 2 at least to do the effects. So you should look for GPUs that are more modern. Maybe I think I even tested under Windows on an old Intel graphics processor, the one that's built like into the motherboard versus having an NVIDIA or an AMD graphics chip, for example. But all of the modern smartphones have GPUs that are compatible with the shader language, so that we use.
Yeah, if you have anything that's been released in the last couple of years, you're probably just fine on all those hardware requirements. When the FireMonkey for Android first came out, when XE5 first came out, there were some older devices, like the Tegra 2 devices, that didn't work, but those Tegra 2 was years ago. Anything that's, like I said, in the last year or two is probably fine as far as hardware requirements.
Yeah, and I'll put the link to the FireMonkey platform requirements. It goes through the different, that's the of the platforms, and then within each of the target platforms, there's requirements for which operating system versions, which processors, and so on. So that's one example. One link is to the platform prerequisites for FireMonkey. Then underneath that, there's we have a document as well for which versions of the operating systems we support. That's the platform status. And I'll get those links up as well. But yeah, I think it just, for ARM processor, what is it, ARM v7, and it has to have the neon instruction sets for floating point. Again, there was some old...
Which all the ARM processors do anymore. There was a few at the beginning that didn't, but now the neon instructions are part of the standard. It's like if you remember back when Intel came out with the MMX instruction set, for a while you wanted to make sure you got a computer with MMX instructions. Now every computer has MMX instructions. They're part of the standard, and that's the same thing with Neon. Neon, when it first came out, was optional, but now it's part of the standard. All processors, all ARM v7 processors have Neon instructions anymore.
Yeah, so we'll talk more about mobile and Android and all that on Friday, but we support Marshmallow, Lollipop, Kit Kat, Jelly Bean, Ice Cream Sandwich. Let's see. And we say here Red Studio and Delphi and on Android. We do not support Honeycomb or Gingerbread, and we don't support the Tegra 2 devices, as Jim mentioned, because we require the Neon support. So let's see. ARM Cortex-A series CPUs, ARM v7, anything with Neon technology and a GPU are all part of the requirements. I put that link, the Android devices support. And for Android, there's an app in the Play Store called SysCheck, SYSCHECK. So if you run SysCheck on your Android device, once you download it from Google Play Store, it'll tell you if a FireMonkey app will run on that device. And it displays all the properties of the processor and Neon support and so on that it finds. So that's a good example to look at, SYSCHECK. But we'll get more of that on Friday. Why is this stuff called FireMonkey? I don't know. It's just a name for the framework, right?
Yeah, it was just, I'm not sure if there's a reason behind it or not. It could be like Delphi was originally the code name for it, for the product, and then they're like, oh, that's kind of cool, so it stuck. The history, yeah. So I'm not sure where the name came from. I wasn't involved in naming it, but that's what it's called. It's just a name. It's kind of catchy, which is kind of cool. Actually, this year is the Chinese year of the monkey, and then each year they do a different animal, and they rotate through a list, and then they also rotate through an element. And so they have, this year is actually the year of fire and monkey together, so it's the year of FireMonkey, which is kind of cool, actually. So there's a question here: if is FMX or VCL faster for drawing? Now, there are probably some situations where VCL is faster, some situations where FireMonkey is faster, but for the kind of stuff I was showing with animations and effects and stuff like that, FireMonkey is generally faster. You can probably find some ways to do it really fast with VCL, but VCL uses GDI by default. FireMonkey uses the GPU. So if you're doing really simple stuff like a grid and scrolling a grid, that's going to be just fine and plenty fast in VCL. But if you're wanting to do images and effects on images and resizing and stuff like that, FireMonkey is going to be faster for image effects. So that's kind of where it comes down for the speed comparison.
Somebody was mentioning, they say, why isn't there scrolling on a T-Flow layout? And just a reminder, you can put a T-scroll box down or a vertical scroll box or whatever, put a T-Flow layout into it, and then you can scroll around the flow layout. So again, everything can be parented to everything, and so and rather than having a layout have scroll boxes and some other layout have scroll boxes and some other component have scroll boxes, you just put those components inside of a scroll box, and then you can scroll the scroll box horizontal and vertical, hence scrolling everything that's contained inside of it. Let's see.
Yeah, that kind of goes to the dry principle of something should only do one thing, right? And so if you can do it through nesting things, then it's going to be done that way. Otherwise, if you went down flow layout that didn't scroll, then you'd have to have, a separate scroll layout that scrolled the one that didn't scroll, or you'd have to have properties on it. So the simplest solution is just to let you nest things and get what you need to have possible.
Again, the question about aligning things and alignments, there's lots of different settings, left, leftmost, right, rightmost, client. So check out, you can do every kind of alignment that I know of, align center, align to the contents. So, and all of that works in whatever form factor you're working in. Small form, larger form. Again, if you need to scroll the form for some reason, then house everything inside of a scroll box. So there's just many choices for alignment. Just check out the align property documentation and samples that we have for that.
Yeah, the FireMonkey's got way more alignment possibilities than VCL did, and there's a lot of things I find I used to be writing code to do to align VCL that FireMonkey can handle automatically. So that's really kind of nice.
So here's a question, Jim, about when you have an animation component, can it be connected to multiple components so you can animate them all, or do you have to put an animator on each one?
So the component can only be attached, or each animation can only be attached to one property on one component, but the animation component has I think it's on process event that fires, and what you can do is you can actually make the animation and not attach it to anything, and then just use the on process event to apply the properties to the various components. So if you want to have multiple components that animations stay perfectly in sync, then that's what you do, is you use the on process event in order to assign the values to the multiple components so that they all stay in sync. Otherwise, each one's going to be running its own thread, and you'll get slightly out of sync. So you can't assign it to one. I actually thought about making one that you could assign to multiples, but I decided it was easier just to write the on-process code when I needed to do that.
Okay, great. Good question. Let's see. Is it possible to do solarization effects by manipulating RGB filters differently? You have access to RGB for an image.
I think there is a solarize effect. I'd have to look at it and see. But there's a lot of effects. There was a sepia tone. Let me look real quick and see if there was a solarize.
Here,
one.
let's see if I can get there fast.
You have to look at them. Nope, there is not a solarization one, but there is a sepia effect.
There's a fill RGB effect, so you can manipulate the RGB. Yeah, I'm scrolling down as well. Let's see if I can scroll faster.
There's a hue effect, a contrast effect, invert effect, monochrome. There's even color key alpha, where you can actually do the green effect. You can do that. Yeah, I don't see a solarized one, but you probably can do it. The source code for all these effects is included, so you could make your own effect and write your own solarized stuff in the shader language that's used, and offload it to the GPU and do that. So just go look at the source code. Use the source.
Yep, and I'll put the link to all the effects that are in the doc wiki. I'll put that in the Q&A logs. Let's see. I'd check out fill RGB effect. That's one as well. Any plans for Windows Mobile? Not currently. iOS and Android have like 98% or more of the smartphone marketplace.
Yeah, Windows Phone has actually dropped, and rumor has it that Microsoft is thinking about abandoning Windows Phone. They didn't. Some of the last stuff they've done, they've not talked much about it, and so a lot of the analysts are saying that Microsoft may be moving away from that, and they started doing some stuff with Android. So they might move to Android and make maybe add Windows Mobile extensions to Android or something like that, because they can't get critical mass. They have not been able to get critical mass with their marketplace. Unfortunately, Windows. I kind of like Windows Phone OS, but it's just there's no apps. Unfortunately, not enough of a marketplace, not enough users.
Yeah, somebody was asking about multiple screens, and you can use multiple screens. There's the T-Screen class that's available, and you can do multiple screens, you can do multiple touches, multiple taps, as well as standard gestures. So if you want to place 10 fingers down and get the array of 10 XY touch points. So different screens can have different resolutions, and again, check out the T-Screen. I don't know if we have an example for using multiple screens, but it gives you a display count. It gives you an array of displays, which in each display then has properties associated with it, with its size, whether it's the primary screen or not. So you have all of that in fmx.forms.screen, and also then fmx.forms.tscreen, and from there you can get the desktop rectangle for each screen, the display count, and other properties. Let me put the multiple display support link in that chat in the Q&A log. So there's another link, which is the multiple display, and there's the screen array for both VCL applications and for FireMonkey applications for doing multi. There's a question about 4K monitors, Jim, and
so there was functionality added for HD resolution monitors. I don't have I have a Mac computer, and so I don't have Windows running natively on a 4K monitor right now. It's all running through a virtual machine. So I haven't experimented with that, but I've heard from people that it does work on 4K monitors because of the new HD support that we added.
Yep, and there's also the IDE. There's a 4K option, so the IDE looks really nice on big monitors. So you can you can set that property as well. There was a question early on about using tab controls and tab sheets, and you can change the size of a tab control, but the tab sheets are parented to the controls, so they'll take the whole client size of whatever the tab control is. So if you change the tab control size, all the sheets will take on that size. You can't really change the size of a tab item to be different, although you could put something in the tab item like a layer, a layout, a panel, or whatever, and change its size so that it would fit in a smaller portion, but you still have the rest of the tab item. You can have icons or bitmaps in the tab item tabs as well as text, or you could have bitmaps but not text. Each tab item has a text property. The tab control can have an image list connected to it, and then in an image list you can have multiple images, bitmaps, icons, whatever, and then inside of each tab item there's an image index that's set to -1 by default, meaning no image, but if you pull down image index once you have an image list connected to the parent tab control, you'll see the different image index values and their associated bitmaps. So you could have bitmaps in tab item tab parts, and you can also make visible and invisible any tab items. So if during your processing you had, let's say, 5 tab items in a tab control, you might have tab item 1 and 2 visible, but set tab items 3, 4, and 5 visible property to false. So you can control how many tab items are visible if at any time, including none. You can also make the whole tab control invisible by setting its visible property to false. So you have all that control both at design time as well as at runtime. And you saw Jim, when he was using tab control, you can easily set the active tab. In addition, you can also make, I think you can make tab items enabled or disabled, meaning if they're disabled, they'll still show up as long as visible is true, but you wouldn't be able to do anything to them, click on them and so on. That would just disable clicks and other kinds of things. So you have all of those capabilities with tab controls, tab items, list boxes, list views, and so on. Let's see.
There's a question here about trying to animate the height of a form, because the height and width of a FireMonkey form are integers, while the float animation deals with floats. And so what you can actually do is there is a what's it called here? If you go into fmx.ani.tanimator, there is an animate int class procedure you can call, and you can pass in the form. And I put some code sample there in the chat window that shows how to do that. And that will animate an integer. I did notice that with the form height, if your ratio's too quick, you won't see it. It'll just go from full size to small size. But if you set it over you want to give it a nice slow time period to go over so that you're able to see the change, because of the fact it is an integer and it is sending a Windows message, and Windows has to change the form's height to do that. That's the reason it's an integer while everything else is a float, because it's rendered on the face of the form.
Yeah, the other option I put in there was, and you talked about this earlier, you could put an animate float or any animation in there and hook its on-process event handler. And during the on-process of the animation, you could have code that does whatever it wants to do, including play with form height and so on. There's actually an example in the documentation for animate float that has an old position, for example, of a form, and the new position you want to calculate and set the form to. And so you could move the form from one place to another, or resize it, or do anything else you want to do in code. And it also answers a question from someone asked, can you set and create layouts and controls with code? And you can do anything you want in code, including creating forms and creating all the things that are inside forms and inside of containers and parent things and so on. So everything you saw Jim doing at design time with FireMonkey, you can also do at runtime in your code. Some developers have no main form, and they start the application, and then under the covers they create the main form, and they create other forms and components, either from kind of application descriptors or databases or files, or you can even stream in the form file with code. So I met a company in India that did a lot of data entry, and they had programmers who created form descriptions for different paper forms. And depending on the data entry you were doing to take paper forms and convert them into, database-based database data, they would just launch up from, startup or menu item, a form, and then you would start using it, and they'd shut it down, and they had just an empty container application that created these forms, the scanned image of the paper form on one screen and the data entry of a Delphi form on the other screen, and they just did keyboarding data entry of paper forms that were so old, maybe carbon copy, that you couldn't do OCR on them, for example. So again, everything you can do in FireMonkey and VCL, for that example, you can do in code completely. Just go under project options, application, and then you can set which is your main form, which are available forms as well. Jim, you showed the layout, the flow layout, and the grid layout. Somebody was asking about T-Grid. We didn't demonstrate T-Grid, but you can use T-Grid. It's got rows and columns and a column editor. It's usually used with database applications, but you could use a T-grid or a string grid and put it on the screen and put data yourself via code into the rows and columns of the grid array. So all of that is possible. Let's see.
So the question here, if the graphic animations like the Earth and Moon examples use the GPU. So all the rendering is done on the GPU. The animations, as far as the values changing, is done in a separate thread. So what happens is the thread will fire and generate the changing values, and then those changing values will be sent to the GPU, where the GPU will then render the new frame, and then that new frame is then synchronized to the user interface thread. So there's a lot going on behind the scenes. But yes, it's using the GPU to do the rendering, and then and it is handling it with multiple threads. And the reason, because of the fact there are multiple threads, that's why if you have two objects that are being synchronized or being animated with separate animations, then they won't necessarily stay in sync because each animator has its own thread.
Also, it sits in the GPU memory, so it offloads not only the CPU processor, but also the CPU main memory. Unless you pull, for example, an image back. So if you, I think, Jim, in one of your examples, you showed sort of page curl and flipping so that you see forward, front, one, back. All of those shader effects are done in the GPU, but then you can go and get the bitmap out of the GPU memory and put it on a form or save it or do whatever you want. People have built image effects applications to take a picture and then take the bitmap and run image effects on it. So the image effects parts all done in the GPU, and then you can get the resulting processed image in a sense and save it back to your camera roll or your hard drive or whatever it might be, depending on the type of application. So it's great because it offloads the CPU from doing all of that activity. And again, the 2D animation or 2D work uses Direct2D on Windows. For the starter edition, that's Win32. It's DirectX. If you do 3D, then it uses DirectX 3D on Windows. And then it's Cocoa on Mac OS and iOS if you have the multi-device versions, professional and above. And we should mention that there's a special promotion happening right now. If you upgrade from starter to professional, you can also add the mobile add-on pack for no additional cost. So I put the shop link somewhere along the way. Just go to shop.embarcadero.com, click on Delphi, or go to the RAD offer page, embarcadero.com/RAD offer, RADOFFER, all lowercase. You'll see the different offers that are available right now for those that want to move. 3D uses direct. Go ahead.
I was going to say it's actually a really, really good deal if you got the free starter edition, because the upgrade pricing from starter to pro gives you a discount on pro as if you paid for starter edition. So getting the free starter edition and then upgrading to pro is like getting a huge discount on pro. Plus, you get the bonus pack or the mobile add-on pack for free. So it's really a good deal right now.
Yep. Yeah, and we're covering mobile just to give you a taste for all of that this Friday on the boot camp. So you'll see how to take all your starter edition FireMonkey code for Win32 and compile it for Win64, macOS, iOS, and Android with no changes. I mean, just recompile, set the target platform, recompile. Toolchain uses the right compilers under the covers and then deploys it to the devices you have connected. Or you can put them in Google Play Store or Apple App Store and so on. For 3D in FireMonkey, it uses the GPU. It uses Direct3D on Windows. It uses OpenGL on macOS, and it uses OpenGL-ES on iOS and Android. So everything is pushed off and done high speed on the GPU through the different native APIs on each of the different platforms. 2D on I mentioned on macOS and iOS is Cocoa, and 2D on Android is just the native API, the NDK, to get to displays on an Android tablet or phone. So all of that is there. Question here about padding and margin. Again, it's pixels, right? It's pixels and widths that you can set for padding and for margins. I guess it's similar to HTML, but a different underlying mechanism, of course.
Right. And actually, it's more like device-independent pixels because
it's dips,
if
right?
you're on
Sorry.
if you're on an HD display, then where you're it's logical pixels, not physical pixels.
Right.
And we'll talk more about that on Friday.
It's one of the people had asked for what are some of the differences between VCL and FireMonkey. On VCL, we use pixels per inch, because that's the Windows API. So to have a general and real world or virtual world resolution for 2D and 3D in the FireMonkey space, it uses dips as the pixel depth and pixel sizing. There was a question here about padding and margin and border. So you can set the border style. There's a form border, and you can set styling on the border. You can set whether the border style that's on the form, whether it's single, it has no border, it's sizable, and so on. You can also decide if there's any border icons that you want for desktop. If you want a system menu, the minimize and maximize buttons, that's on Windows, and on Mac OS for desktop applications. So you have the control for everything related to borders as well. So have fun with borders there. So there was a question about Linux. So Linux, we're going to focus on, and the roadmap talks about that in Marco Cantu's recent blog, on server-side and console applications. There won't be a FireMonkey, no FireMonkey or GUI for Linux at this time. Most people are going to use Linux for server-side, building REST servers, web servers, other kinds of servers and device handlers and so on. We don't have a stream. There's a question about FMX component for receiving streaming video. I think there are some third-party components. We don't have one. The current media player is file-based, but I've seen some components. If you just search for Delphi FireMonkey streaming video, that's probably a good Google search to work with to find some third parties.
I know I've seen third-party libraries that do streaming video. Yeah. There's so many third-party libraries out there. It's just amazing some of the cool stuff people are doing out there.
Yeah, Box2D is included for physics library. Some people use the Newton Dynamics library. That's a 3D physics library. One place to go is, I think, PascalGamer.com. I think that's what it's called. Because there's another one called Sphinx, I think, or Pascal Game Development. So if you go to PascalGameDevelopment.com, that site talks about things to do with physics engines and so on. Also, come tomorrow. Come tomorrow is 2D game development with Eli M. It's all about game development in FireMonkey and the apps that he'll show tomorrow. The 4 games he has run on Starter Edition, Win32. They run on Win64, Mac OS, iOS, and Android. Same code, just recompiling the target with sound. He hooks under the covers into the sound systems on each platform as well. So come to game development tomorrow, Thursday, and see what's there. And then Friday is mobile day, more about talking about how to take your FireMonkey apps and move them across multiple devices, move them to mobile, move them to Mac desktop. Some things you'll have to think about. There's a T-main menu component, a T-menu, menu item components, pop-up menu. All of those make sense in a mouse / menuing system like Windows and Mac OS. Don't make sense really on the mobile devices there. You usually use toolbars with speed buttons and things of that kind, or the you did the MultiView, Jim, where you have the little hamburger icon that pulls out a cabinet of icons you can choose, for example, and goes back. Some people use scrolling toolbars with buttons to get the sort of equivalent of kind of a linear menu versus a pull-down pop-up menus. So there's some differences that way. If you use a main menu component and you rebuild it for iOS and Android, it just doesn't do anything. It's a no-op. The way FireMonkey works under the covers, I don't think you talked about the services interface, Jim, is that, and you can use these services interfaces yourself. You can query what services are available on each of the platform when the application starts up. In FireMonkey, when it's initializing itself, inside of the application that you compile, it checks to see if there's things like a printing service, a menu service, a mouse service, a dialogue service, a screen service. I mean, you might be running an application on a Windows system that has no monitor, that maybe has a USB connection or something to a green and red light, something like that. So you can even check for the different services that are available and have your code adapt appropriately based on what services it finds. And FireMonkey does the same thing under the covers. Oh gosh, Darren Kaczynski, if you search for Darren Kaczynski's What's New in FireMonkey, the past several code rages, he talks about the services architecture of FireMonkey and what's new in different services. So you can do everything you need to do to query the services that are available, and then FireMonkey adapts appropriately. There's a question here about PC Mac version of the Marquee. I mean, we have splash screens that you can use. I guess Marquee is like a movie marquee or maybe some kind of scrolling marquee. I mean, I could do something with animations and a toolbar. I guess we don't have a marquee that I remember. Do you remember, Jim?
Yeah, I don't recall.
Or an image
not one that was
effect.
built in. I think there's a third-party one that did that.
Okay.
But you could really easily do that with animations, though, and a layout really easily.
Yeah, I'm just searching on Google. Scrolling text effects, some people asked about things of that kind. So I think the toolbar, color toolbar, or a few, Eli's got a pointer to a few things. I'll put this one in, I'll put this link in the Q&A log. So there's not one built in, but there's ways to do it in FireMonkey. There's Eli M's, a great resource. I'm not sure if you talked about it, Jim. I was watching, but I was answering questions. FMXExpress.com is Eli's portal for everything FireMonkey. So www.fmxexpress.com. Eli puts up links to all sorts of things that are happening with FireMonkey and what you can do with FireMonkey. It's a great resource for FireMonkey development on the web. So fmxexpress.com, and you can search there. Again, he points to demos, third-party components, things you can do, videos, examples, sample code, and so on. So there's a question here about FireMonkey changing color of operating system frame within desktop application.
If you can, so it can call a Windows API to do that, if there's a Windows API for that, or if it's part of the client area, then yeah, you can totally do whatever you want to in that spot there. So the answer would be yes, but I'm not sure exactly what you're trying to accomplish, but whatever it is you're trying to accomplish, you can do it with FireMonkey.
You could also, on the form, there's a property called full screen, especially used for things like games on mobile devices, but you could do full screen and then do your own custom painting of frames around your application if you want to control those things. We do adhere to the default style and the style setting on Windows. So if you've chosen a certain theme, then it picks up the theme for the Windows elements around. Again, FireMonkey is really focused on inside of the container of a window on Windows. So it A form in FireMonkey is the container of all the components that make up the client area of the form. But you can then set other properties like system menu, minimize, maximize, and so on. And those will pick up whatever theme you've set for your Windows desktop, using the Windows settings. But again, you can control everything. You could set it either full screen and do whatever you want, do your own painting of buttons, and if you click on them, have them do minimize, maximize, and such. You can also use style file to style any of the controls that FireMonkey has, and Jim showed that and talked about that. So, everything is possible in that respect about styling. And again, as Jim mentioned, underneath the covers there is a window handle that you can get to and do the things. The question about FireMonkey and Metropolis. Metropolis is just, or Jim, I've been talking a lot. Maybe you want to talk about Metropolis. It's a look and feel that came from Microsoft's Metro days, right?
Yeah. So Microsoft with I guess was it Windows 7, they came out with this UI look and feel called Metropolis or Metro, and then they later changed the name to Modern. And so we had Metropolis, which was just a style that and some stylistic elements that gave it your app that sort of look and feel. FireMonkey is a full framework, and you can have a Metropolis style FireMonkey application or Metropolis style VCL application. But so Metropolis is a style, if you will, whereas FireMonkey is a full graphical framework.
Yeah, T-style book. And there you can then create your own custom styles, or we give you premium styles you can download as well. And you can have styles you want, including Windows 10, for example. Looks, the dark style, the what is it, blue style, green style? Is there still an orange style? I've lost track of the different styles. But there is the whole style pack that's available. Premium styles that you can go and grab, registered user downloads, and then assign those styles. They show up. The default ones we ship with are in your 18.0 and the user's public documents, Embarcadero Studio 18.0 styles, and so you'll see in there the Windows styles like Windows 10 Blue, Windows 10 Dark, and then the default Windows 10 default style. I guess there's a Modern Dark. I think I've installed some other things along the way. I think the Tron one, I don't know if you use that one, Jim, but the Tron is a transparent look. You can kind of see through. It looks like...
Yeah, I love that one. That's my favorite.
Yeah, we can't use the term Tron because that's a copyrighted movie and story in the Disney world, but you have all of those capabilities. And there are other styles that people have created that are out there as well. So T-style book, if you don't have a T-style book in your FireMonkey application, then we'll just start up with the standard Windows style. And same thing, so if you're running on Windows 7, it'll have the Windows 7 default style. If you're running on Windows 10, it'll have the default Windows 10 style. So again, there's options under project options application where you can enable runtime themes, enable high DPI, set custom orientations, landscape, portrait, and all of those kinds of things. And then use T-style book to set standard or custom styles. You could even give your users the ability to choose their style or have an INI file that would query the themes or styles or the operating system or the customization you want to do for your users out there, your customers. And you could have the same app that has one look for styles on one customer site and a different one on different customer sites. So you have total flexibility as for the look and feel, including full screen and have at it.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, I think we've come to the questions at 20 minutes after the hour, so I think probably I'll wrap it up here.
Absolutely.
Thanks everybody for joining us.